Every wolf finds their mate. The moon goddess provides for all her children. That's what the matron whispered to Arya every night in the orphanage, her wrinkled hand stroking Arya's silver hair. But when you became the only wolf in history rejected by your own pack before you even shifted, you learned that some children, the goddess, simply forgot. The auction block smelled like desperation and cheap perfume. Arya stood in line with the other Omegas, her wrists bound in iron that burned against her skin. Around her, girls preened and postured, hoping to catch the eye of a wealthy alpha. They had futures, destinations, purpose. Arya had nothing but a body that refused to shift and a wolf that had never spoken. 23 years old. And she'd never felt her wolf stir. Not once. The pack elders called her broken. The other Omegas called her cursed. And tonight, on the auction block in the Crystal Moon Pack's Grand Hall, she would learn what the rest of the world called wolves like her, unwanted. But in the shadows of the hall, a pair of golden eyes watched. And when the Alpha King saw what everyone else overlooked, he didn't see broken. He saw destiny. Chapter 1. The Broken Omega. The Crystal Moon Orphanage sat on the edge of the Packlands, where the forest grew thin and the soil turned to dust. It was a place for wolves. No one wanted the orphaned, the weak, the defective. Arya had lived there for as long as memory stretched. 23 years of gray walls and grayer futures. "Stand up straight, girl." Matron Elise's voice cut through the morning cold as she inspected the line of Omegas preparing for the auction. Her eyes, once kind when Arya was small, now held only pity. Even broken things can be useful if they're presented well. Arya's fingers trembled as she smoothed down the simple white dress they'd given her. Around her, the other Omega girls wore silk and satin, their hair elaborately styled, their wolves lending them an inner glow that made their skin luminous. At 23, most of them were younger than her 17, 18, still fresh and desirable. "Do you think anyone will bid on her?" whispered Celeste, a beautiful Omega with golden hair that cascaded down her back like honey. She didn't bother lowering her voice. "I heard the last wolfless Omega sold for less than a milk cow." "That's generous," replied Vivienne, examining her perfect nails. "At least a milk cow produces something of value." Matron Elise clapped her hands sharply. "Enough. Into the carriages. We leave for the Crystal Moon Pack house in 10 minutes. Arya climbed into the last carriage alone. The other girls refused to sit with her, as if her defect might somehow be contagious. Through the small window, she watched the orphanage disappear behind a veil of dust and dying trees. She'd been 6 years old when she first realized something was wrong. All the other children had shifted by 5, their wolves emerging in squeals of delight and clumsy puppy tumbles. But Arya's wolf never came. She'd waited in the moonlight, praying to the moon goddess, begging for the transformation that would make her whole. The goddess never answered. By age 13, when every wolf should have fully mastered their shift, the pack elders performed the rite of awakening, a sacred ceremony to force a wolf's emergence. They'd chained Arya in silver, cut her palms, called upon ancient magic. Nothing happened. The head elder, Marcus Stonehelm, had pronounced her judgment. Wolfless, an abomination. The goddess has turned her face from this child. After that, the whispers started. Cursed, broken, wrong. The carriage jolted over a rough patch of road, and Arya's head struck the wooden wall. She barely felt it. Pain had become such a constant companion that new hurts barely registered. The Crystal Moon Pack house appeared through the trees like a palace from a fairy tale. White marble columns reached toward the sky, and gardens bloomed in impossible colors. Wolves in fine clothing milled about the grounds, alphas, betas, merchants, traders. All here for one thing, the Omega auction. "Out!" commanded Matron Elise, yanking open the carriage door. "And remember, speak only when spoken to. Eyes down. Do not embarrass the orphanage more than your existence already does." The words should have hurt. Perhaps they once did. Now they just floated through Arya like smoke. The Omegas were led to a preparation room beneath the grand hall. Servants bustled around, applying makeup, fixing hair, adjusting clothes. When they reached Arya, they paused. "What are we supposed to do with this?" asked one servant, a beta woman with sharp features. Just make her presentable. Matron Elise sighed. Someone might want a housemaid. The goddess knows she's good for nothing else. They brushed her silver hair until it shone, applied minimal makeup to her pale face, and left her sitting in the corner while they fawned over the other Omegas. Celeste received a dress of deep emerald that made her eyes sparkle. Vivienne wore ruby red that clung to her curves. Arya wore white, the color of surrender. "Listen up!" A sharp-faced man in official pack regalia entered the room. Beta Carson, the auctioneer. "Tonight, we have buyers from 12 packs, 3 visiting alphas, and..." He paused dramatically. The Alpha King himself. Gasps rippled through the Omegas. The Alpha King, ruler of all the northern territories, commander of 5 great packs, the most powerful wolf alive. "He's looking for a mate," Beta Carson continued, his eyes gleaming. "His true mate died 2 years ago, and he's decided it's time to choose a new queen. One of you could become the most powerful woman in the north." The room exploded in excited chatter. Girls primped and preened, practicing their most alluring smiles. Even Matron Elise looked hopeful. Arya stayed in her corner, invisible. Beta Carson's eyes swept the room and landed on her. His lip curled. "You, wolfless girl, you'll go last. Try not to humiliate us." The auction began at sunset. Through the walls, Arya heard the roar of the crowd, the bang of the auctioneer's gavel, the excited calls of bidders. One by one, the Omegas were led upstairs to the auction block. Celeste went for 20,000 gold pieces, a fortune. Vivienne for 18,000. Even the plainest Omegas fetched respectable prices. Hours passed, the room emptied. Finally, only Arya remained. "Last one," muttered Beta Carson, grabbing her arm roughly. "Let's get this over with." He dragged her up the stairs and shoved her onto the stage. The grand hall was enormous, lit by 1,000 candles. Rows of buyers sat in plush chairs, their eyes calculating and cold. At the front, on an elevated platform, sat 3 visiting alphas in ceremonial dress, and beside them, in a throne of black wood and silver, sat the Alpha King. Arya kept her eyes down, as trained, but she felt his gaze like a physical weight. The entire hall seemed to lean away from him, as if his power created a pressure that pushed against reality itself. "Our final offering tonight," Beta Carson announced, his voice lacking enthusiasm. "Arya, age 23, from the Crystal Moon Orphanage, in excellent health, obedient, hard-working." He paused, and Arya heard the discomfort in his voice. "No wolf." The hall erupted in laughter. Cruel, mocking laughter that crashed over Arya like waves. "No wolf? What good is she? 23 and wolfless? She's defective. I wouldn't take her for free." Beta Carson's face reddened. "Perhaps suitable for household work. Shall we start the bidding at 50 gold pieces?" Silence. 40? More silence. Someone coughed. Another laughed. 20 gold pieces? Beta Carson's voice cracked with desperation. Surely someone. 10 gold pieces. A rough voice from the back. A merchant with a scarred face and dead eyes. "I need someone to scrub my tavern floors." Arya's throat closed. 10 gold pieces. Less than the cost of a cart horse. 10 gold going once. Beta Carson raised his gavel. 500,000 gold pieces. The voice cut through the hall like a blade through silk. Deep. Commanding. Absolute. Every head turned. The Alpha King had risen from his throne. His golden eyes bright as suns locked onto Arya. In that moment, the world contracted to just the two of them. King and broken Omega. Power and weakness. "I said 500,000 gold pieces." His voice was softer now, but it carried the weight of mountains. "For the girl, and I will accept no other bids." The hall exploded in chaos. Shouts, gasps, frantic whispers. Beta Carson dropped his gavel. The merchant who'd bid 10 gold pieces looked like he might faint. The Alpha King descended from his platform, his warriors parting like water before him. He crossed the hall in powerful strides, climbed the auction steps, and stood before Arya. She forced herself to look up. He was devastating. Not handsome, handsome was too small a word. He was formed from power itself. all sharp angles and dangerous beauty. His dark hair fell to his shoulders. His golden eyes held centuries of knowledge and pain. "What is your name?" His voice was gentle now, meant only for her. "Ah, Arya, Alpha King." Her voice cracked. "Arya," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Do you know why I bit on you?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. A slight smile touched his lips, sad and knowing. "Because everyone else saw broken, I saw hidden." He extended his hand. "Come. You're going home." Arya stared at his hand, broad, scarred, powerful. Behind her, she felt Beta Carson's shock, felt the entire hall holding its breath, felt the weight of every moment of rejection, every whispered curse, every pitying glance she'd endured for 23 years. And she placed her trembling hand in his. "Subscribe if you believe Arya deserves better than this. Because people like Arya need an audience that won't abandon them. Drop a comment if Arya's pain is your pain too." Chapter 2. The King's Castle. The Alpha King's carriage was nothing like the cramped, splintering wagon that had brought Arya to the auction. This was a mobile palace, black lacquered wood inlaid with silver, cushioned seats of midnight velvet, and windows of crystal so clear they seemed invisible. Arya sat rigid against the far corner, trying to make herself small. Across from her, the Alpha King watched with those unsettling golden eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone into the trembling core of her. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question. Arya's fingers twisted in the white fabric of her dress. "I don't understand, Alpha King. Why would you?" She couldn't finish. The words felt too presumptuous. "Cale." His voice was firm but not unkind. "My name is Cale, and you will use it when we're alone." I couldn't possibly." Arya's breath caught. To use an Alpha King's given name was a privilege reserved for equals, for family, for my mate, Cale finished, as if reading her thoughts. "Which is what you will become." The carriage suddenly felt airless. "But I'm wolfless. I can't be anyone's mate. The bond requires recognition." Cale leaned forward, his presence filling the space between them. "And I recognize you, Arya. I have recognized you since the moment I saw you on that stage, trying to disappear, while the world mocked you. You're mistaking pity for, I pity no one." The words were sharp enough to cut. Then, softer, "But I understand what it means to be rejected by your own kind." Arya looked up at him fully for the first time. In the flickering carriage lantern light, she saw something she hadn't noticed before: pain, deep and old and carefully hidden, but there, in the set of his jaw, in the shadows beneath those golden eyes. "How could you possibly?" she began. "Because I killed my true mate." The words fell like stones into water. 2 years ago, with these hands. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the horse's hooves seemed to quiet. "She was infected," Cale continued, his voice distant now, as if speaking from another world. "A rogue attack. The bite spread poison through her blood, turned her feral. She begged me," his jaw clenched. "She begged me to end it before she became something that would slaughter innocents. So I did. I held her, as her heart stopped beating, and I felt our bond snap like a chain breaking." Arya's hand moved without thought, reaching across the space between them. She stopped herself inches from touching his arm, suddenly aware of the presumption. But Cale caught her hand, his fingers warm and rough against hers. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't stop yourself from showing kindness. The world has taught you to be small. I'm going to teach you to take up space." The carriage climbed higher into the mountains. Through the windows, Arya watched the forest change the scraggly trees of the lowlands, giving way to towering pines, the dusty ground becoming rich earth. The air itself felt different here, cleaner, charged with something ancient and powerful. "The Silverstone territory," Cale explained, following her gaze. "My lands. 5 packs answer to me here. 3,000 wolves call this place home. 3,000. Arya had never seen more than 100 wolves in one place. "They will be your wolves too," Cale continued. "Your pack, your people. They'll never accept me." The words escaped before Arya could stop them. "I'm wolfless, broken. No pack has ever wanted." Arya. Cale's voice commanded her attention. Look at me. She did. You are not broken. You are not cursed. You are not a mistake. Each word was delivered with absolute certainty. You are exactly what you were meant to be, and if my pack cannot see that, then I will teach them, one wolf at a time, if necessary. The carriage crested a final hill, and Arya's breath caught. The Silverstone castle rose from the mountain like it had grown there, gray stone and silver spires reaching toward the moon. It was massive, ancient, and beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. Hundreds of windows blazed with warm light. Gardens terraced down the mountainside in cascading levels of green and gold. Home, Cale said simply. The gates opened before them, silver wrought in the shape of wolves mid-leap. Guards in black uniforms saluted as the carriage passed. Servants rushed forward as they pulled up to the main entrance, a grand staircase of white marble that gleamed in the torchlight. Cale stepped out first, then turned and offered his hand to Arya. She took it, her legs trembling as she descended onto the marble. A crowd had gathered. Dozens of wolves, warriors, servants, nobles, all staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion to barely concealed disgust. Presenting Arya, announced a dignified older man in formal robes, the king's herald. Chosen by His Majesty, the Alpha King Cale Silverstone. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Is that the wolfless girl from the auction? He paid $500,000 for her? She's so plain. What was he thinking? A woman pushed through the crowd, tall, elegant, with auburn hair piled high and a dress of deep purple silk. Her wolf radiated through her, making her skin glow with health and power. She was stunning in the way only a strong she-wolf could be. Cale. Her voice was smooth as honey, and twice as sweet. Surely there's been some mistake. This child cannot possibly be Lady Seraphina. Cale's voice froze the woman mid-step. I don't recall requesting your opinion. Seraphina's perfect smile tightened. Of course, Alpha King. I only thought given your position you might want someone more suitable. Someone with a wolf. Someone who could actually bear strong heirs. The crowd murmured agreement. Arya felt the weight of their judgment, pressing down on her like physical force. Her chest tightened, her vision swam. She couldn't breathe. Excuse me, she whispered, pulling her hand from Cale's and stumbling backward. I can't. She turned and ran. Behind her, she heard Cale's voice, sharp with command. No one follows her. She needs space. Arya fled through the castle's entrance hall, all marble and gold and tapestries depicting great battles. She ran up staircases, down corridors, not knowing where she was going, just needing to escape the stares and whispers and crushing certainty that this was all a terrible mistake. She found herself in a tower room, small and round, with windows looking out over the mountains. The moon hung low and full, painting everything in silver light. Arya collapsed against the window, pressing her forehead to the cool glass. Below, the castle sprawled in all its impossible glory. This wasn't her world. These weren't her people. She was a broken omega from a forgotten orphanage, and no amount of royal attention would change what she fundamentally was. Nothing. You run fast for someone without a wolf. Arya spun. Cale stood in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. He'd followed her despite his own command. Of course he had. I'm sorry, Arya said quickly. I shouldn't have run. Everyone was staring, and Lady Seraphina was right. I can't be what you need. I can't give you strong heirs or lead a pack or… Stop. Cale crossed the room in 3 strides. He gripped her shoulders gently but firmly. Listen to me very carefully, Arya. I don't need strong heirs. I don't need a she-wolf who can fight battles. I have warriors for that. I have advisors. I have an entire kingdom of wolves who can do what wolves do. His hands moved to cup her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. What I have needed for 2 years, is someone who understands what it means to be rejected by the very thing that should love you most. Someone who knows how it feels to be called broken when you're just different. Someone who has survived, despite the world telling them they shouldn't exist. Tears blurred Arya's vision. Why me? Because when I looked at you on that stage, being sold for less than livestock, you didn't bow your head in shame. You stood there with your spine straight and your eyes forward, and you endured. His thumb brushed away a tear. That's not weakness, Arya. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. I'm still wolfless, she whispered. And I'm still a king who murdered his mate. Cale's smile was sad and crooked. We're both broken in our own ways. Maybe that's exactly why we fit. Before Arya could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. A young woman appeared in the doorway, petite, with wild black curls and bright green eyes that sparkled with mischief. There you are, she exclaimed, bouncing into the room. I've been looking everywhere. I'm Lyra, by the way, beta female, second in command, professional meddler. She extended her hand to Arya. And you must be the girl who just gave Lady Seraphina a public aneurysm. I like you already. Despite everything, Arya felt a small smile tug at her lips. Don't encourage her, Cale said, but there was warmth in his voice. Lyra lives to cause chaos. Someone has to keep this gloomy castle interesting. Lyra grabbed Arya's hand and pulled her toward the door. Come on. I'll show you to your rooms. They're in the Queen's Tower, gorgeous view, private bath, and far enough from Seraphina's quarters that you won't have to smell her perfume. Lyra, Cale warned. What? I'm being helpful. Lyra grinned back at him. You deal with the uptight nobles. I'll deal with making sure your future queen doesn't run away in the middle of the night. As Lyra dragged her down the corridor, chattering about castle gossip and which servants were trustworthy, Arya glanced back at Cale. He stood in the tower doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. But for the first time since the auction, Arya felt something strange flutter in her chest. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this broken Omega had finally found a place where she could be whole. Chapter 3. The Queen's Test. The Queen's Tower was a dream made of stone and starlight. Lyra pushed open massive double doors carved with running wolves, revealing a suite of rooms that made Arya's throat tighten. The main chamber was circular, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. A bed large enough for 5 people sat against one wall, draped in silk the color of midnight. Plush rugs covered gleaming hardwood floors. A fireplace crackled with welcoming warmth. Not bad, right? Lyra flopped onto a velvet settee, grinning. Cale had it prepared the moment he returned from the auction. He knew you'd be coming home with him. How could he have known? Arya moved slowly into the room, afraid to touch anything. Everything looked too expensive, too beautiful, too fragile for someone like her. He didn't even know I existed until tonight. Lyra's expression softened. That's where you're wrong. Cale's been searching for 2 years. Every Omega auction in the Northern Territories, he attended. Every pack gathering, he scanned the crowds. He was looking for something specific, though he wouldn't tell anyone what. But I'm wolfless, Arya whispered. What could he possibly have been searching for in someone like me? Recognition. The voice came from the doorway. Both women turned. An elderly woman stood there, bent with age but radiating a power that made the air shimmer. Her eyes were milky white blind, but they seemed to see more than any sighted person could. Elder Moira, Lyra said respectfully, rising from the settee. The old woman shuffled into the room, her gnarled walking stick tapping against the floor. She stopped directly in front of Arya, those unseeing eyes fixed on her face. You're the one, Elder Moira said. The one from the prophecy. Arya's heart stuttered. Prophecy? 20 years ago, I had a vision. Elder Moira's voice was like dry leaves rustling. I saw a king drowning in darkness, and a girl with no wolf who would pull him into the light. I saw a bond forged not by the moon goddess, but by choice, by recognition, by 2 broken pieces fitting together to make something whole. That's impossible, Arya breathed. Bonds without wolves don't exist. It's never been done. Never been done and impossible are 2 different things, child. Elder Moira reached out, her wrinkled hand finding Arya's cheek with surprising accuracy. The moon goddess works in mysterious ways. Sometimes she gives us exactly what we need, not what we expect. Tell her about the test, Lyra said quietly. Arya's stomach dropped. Test? Elder Moira's expression grew grave. The pack will not accept you easily. Seraphina has been positioning herself as Cale's future mate for months. She has supporters, Allies. Wolves who believe strength comes only from shifting and fighting. They will see you as weak. Unworthy. Because I am, Arya said, the words automatic, after years of hearing them. Because you appear to be. Elder Moira's grip on Arya's cheek tightened. Appearances can be deceiving. But if you're to become queen, you must prove your worth. In 3 days, the pack will gather for the queen's test, a series of trials that any prospective Luna must pass. What kind of trials? Arya's voice was barely audible. Lyra grimaced. Traditionally, combat trials, endurance runs, tests of wolf strength and dominance. Then I've already failed. Arya pulled away from Elder Moira's touch, wrapping her arms around herself. I can't shift. I can't fight. I can't do any of the things a Luna is supposed to do. Which is why the rules will be changed, Elder Moira said firmly. Cale has already decreed it. The trials will test wisdom, courage, and heart qualities that have nothing to do with having a wolf. Serafina won't accept that, Lyra warned. She'll claim it's favoritism, that Cale is weakening pack tradition for a wolfless girl. Let her claim what she wants. Elder Moira turned toward the door, her stick tapping. The truth will reveal itself in 3 days. Until then, child, you have much to learn. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your real education begins. After the elder left, Lyra helped Arya prepare for bed, chattering to fill the nervous silence. She showed her the bathing room, complete with a tub carved from a single piece of marble, and the closet filled with dresses in every color imaginable. Cale thought of everything, Lyra said, running her hand over a gown of deep sapphire. He wants you to feel like you belong here. But I don't, Arya said quietly. Belong here, I mean. How can I? Everyone saw how they looked at me tonight. The disgust, the confusion. Lyra turned to face her, all mischief gone from her expression. You want to know a secret? Half the pack was disgusted when Cale became king. Arya blinked. What? Why? Because he was only 25. Because his father died in battle, and some wolves thought Cale was too young, too inexperienced, too different from the traditional alpha kings. Lyra's smile was sharp. He proved them all wrong. He united 5 warring packs. He brought prosperity to lands that were dying. He became the strongest king the North has seen in 300 years, not because he was what they expected, but because he was exactly what they needed. She placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. You're exactly what this pack needs too. They just don't know it yet. After Lyra left, Arya stood at the window, watching the moon track across the sky. Below, the castle grounds stretched out in silver and shadow. Somewhere down there, Cale was dealing with angry nobles. Serafina was plotting. The pack was whispering about the broken Omega their king had chosen, and in 3 days, Arya would have to prove she deserved to stand at Cale's side. She had never felt more terrified in her life. The next morning arrived too quickly. Arya woke to find Lyra already in her room, throwing open curtains and letting in blazing sunlight. Up, you have training to do and exactly 2 days to prepare for the Queen's test. Training? Arya sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What kind of training? The useful kind. Lyra tossed a simple tunic and pants onto the bed. Get dressed. We're starting with the basics. An hour later, Arya found herself in a massive library deep in the castle's heart. Shelves stretched 30 feet high, packed with books so old their spines cracked when touched. Elder Moira sat at a long table, various texts spread before her. Sit, the old woman commanded. Arya obeyed. The first trial will test your knowledge of pack law and history, Elder Moira began. Serafina has studied these texts her entire life. She knows every law, every precedent, every loophole. You have 2 days to catch up. Arya stared at the mountain of books. That's impossible. Then you'd better start reading. Elder Moira pushed a thick tome toward her. This contains the founding laws, the original rules set down by the first wolves. You'll need to know them by heart. For the next 6 hours, Arya read until her eyes burned. Pack hierarchy, territory laws, mating bonds and challenge rights, punishment protocols for rogues, the complex web of traditions that governed wolf society. Lyra appeared at noon with food, which Arya barely tasted. then back to reading. By evening, her head swam with information. She could barely remember her own name, let alone the 17 subclauses of the Territory Challenge Protocol. Enough. Elder Moira closed the book Arya had been staring at. Knowledge without understanding is useless. Tell me, what is the most important law in the pack? Arya's mind raced through everything she'd read. The law of the Alpha? The mating bond protocol? The law of recognition, Elder Moira interrupted. Do you know what it says? Arya shook her head. It says, a true Alpha recognizes worth where others see weakness. A true Luna recognizes strength where others see broken. The old woman's blind eyes seemed to pierce through Arya. That's why Cale chose you. He recognized something everyone else missed. But what? Arya's frustration boiled over. What could he possibly see in me? I have no wolf, no strength. No, you survived. Cale's voice cut through the library like a blade. Arya spun. He stood in the doorway, still in his formal council attire, all black leather and silver clasps. He looked exhausted, dark circles under those golden eyes. You survived 23 years of rejection, Cale continued, walking toward her. You survived being called broken, cursed, worthless. You survived being sold on an auction block for less than livestock. And you're still here. Still fighting. Still standing. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. That's not weakness, Arya. That's the kind of strength that can't be taught. The kind that's forged in suffering and tempered in survival. The pack doesn't see it that way, Arya whispered. Then we'll make them see. Cale's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. Together, a sharp cough from Elder Moira broke the moment. As touching as this is, Alpha King, your future queen needs rest. Tomorrow brings harder lessons. Cale smiled, a real smile that softened his harsh features. Then, I'll escort her to her chambers. They walked through the castle in comfortable silence, Cale's hand resting lightly on her lower back. Servants bowed as they passed. Guards saluted, and through every corridor, Arya felt eyes watching, judging, weighing her worth. At her door, Cale paused. I know you're afraid of the test. Terrified, Arya admitted. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. His golden eyes held hers. But remember, you're not doing this alone. I'll be there. Lyra will be there. Elder Moira will be there. We believe in you. Even if you don't believe in yourself yet. He leaned down, and for a heart-stopping moment, Arya thought he might kiss her. Instead, his lips brushed her forehead, gentle, reverent, full of promise. Sleep well, Arya. Tomorrow you begin becoming a queen. As her door closed, Arya leaned against it, her heart racing. Through the wood, she heard Cale's footsteps fade down the corridor. 2 days until the queen's test. 2 days to prove she deserved to stand beside an Alpha King. 2 days to become something more than the broken Omega everyone believed her to be. Arya walked to the window, looking out at the moon full and bright and impossibly distant. Please, she whispered to the moon goddess who had never answered her prayers. If you're listening, help me not fail. The moon remained silent, but somewhere deep in Arya's chest, something stirred. Not her wolf she'd long since accepted that would never come. Something else. Something that felt almost like strength. Chapter 4. The First Trial. The second day of preparation began before dawn. Arya woke to find not Lyra at her bedside, but a stern-faced woman in warrior leathers, scarred, muscled, with gray streaking her dark hair. Up, the woman barked. I'm Commander Thorne. I train the King's Guard. Today, I train you. But I thought... Arya scrambled out of bed. Elder Moira said the trials would test wisdom and heart, not combat. Wisdom means nothing if you can't stand on your own 2 feet when someone tries to knock you down. Commander Thorne tossed a set of training clothes at Arya. The second trial is endurance. You'll be required to navigate the mountain pass alone, facing whatever obstacles are placed in your path. Without a wolf's strength, you'll need to rely on strategy and sheer stubbornness. 30 minutes later, Arya stood in the castle's training yard, her muscles already screaming from the warm-up exercises Commander Thorne had forced her through. Around them, warriors practiced combat drills, their wolves lending them supernatural speed and strength. "Again," Thorne commanded. Arya pulled herself up on the climbing rope for the 20th time, her palms raw and bleeding, her arms shook, her lungs burned. Everything hurt. "I can't," she gasped, dropping to the ground. "Then you'll fail tomorrow." Thorne's expression was merciless. "The mountain pass has a 20-foot cliff you'll need to scale. If you can't climb a rope in a protected training yard, how will you manage rock face in the wind and cold?" "Why are you helping me?" Arya asked between ragged breaths. "Everyone else in this pack wants me gone." Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Then, 15 years ago, I lost my wolf. Arya's head snapped up. "What?" "A battle against rogues. One of them had a cursed blade, dark magic forged specifically to sever the bond between wolf and human." Thorne's jaw clenched. "I survived. My wolf didn't. For months, I was exactly what you are now. Wolfless. Broken. Useless. According to pack law. But you're commander of the King's Guard," Arya said, confused. "How did you—" "Cale's father was king then. He told me I had two choices: accept being demoted to Omega status and live as a servant, or prove that my worth had nothing to do with my wolf." Thorne's eyes hardened with memory. "So I trained. Harder than anyone. I learned to compensate for my missing strength with strategy, speed, and skill. I became twice the warrior I'd been with a wolf, because I had something to prove." She grabbed Arya's shoulders, forcing eye contact. "You have something to prove too. Not to the pack, they don't matter. To yourself. Show yourself that you're more than the limitations others have placed on you." Arya felt something crack open in her chest. "Did your wolf ever come back?" Thorne smiled, sad and knowing. 5 years later, the moon goddess works on her own timeline, but by then, I'd already learned the most important lesson. A wolf doesn't make you strong. It just makes you wolf. Strength comes from here. She tapped Arya's chest, right over her heart. "And you have more of that than anyone I've ever met. How can you possibly know that? Because you're still standing." Thorne stepped back, gesturing to the rope. "Now climb. And this time, don't stop until you reach the top." Arya climbed. Her hands bled, her muscles screamed, her vision swam with exhaustion. But she reached the top. That afternoon, Elder Moira continued drilling Arya on pack law, but now, instead of just reading, the old woman asked questions, rapid-fire challenges that forced Arya to think, not just memorize. A rogue challenges the alpha for territory. What are the alpha's 3 legal responses? Accept the challenge and fight, delegate a champion to fight in his place, or invoke the law of sanctuary if the rogue has just cause for grievance. Good. A mated pair wishes to dissolve their bond. Under what circumstances is this permitted? If both parties consent, if one party is proven unfaithful, or if the bond causes physical harm to either wolf through incompatibility. Excellent. Now, Elder Moira's expression grew serious. A wolfless Omega wishes to claim the position of Luna. What does pack law say? Arya's mouth went dry. I didn't see anything about that in the texts, because it's never happened before. Elder Moira leaned forward. Which means there's no law against it. Seraphina will argue tradition. She'll say that a Luna without a wolf cannot fulfill her duties, cannot lead hunts, cannot fight to protect the pack, cannot produce strong heirs. She's right, Arya whispered. Is she? Elder Moira's blind eyes seemed to see straight through her. Tell me, child, what is a Luna's true purpose? Arya thought back to all the texts she'd read. To stand beside the Alpha, to provide counsel, to unite the pack and ensure its prosperity. And which of those requires a wolf? Arya opened her mouth, then closed it. None of them did. A Luna's role was political, social, spiritual, not physical. Seraphina will make it about strength. Elder Moira continued. You must make it about wisdom. She will try to intimidate. You must remain calm. She will attack. You must defend with words sharper than claws. I don't know if I can do that, Arya admitted. Then you'll learn. Elder Moira pushed another book toward her. This contains records of every Luna in Silverstone history. Study them. Learn how they ruled, how they spoke, how they commanded respect. Then tomorrow, channel every single one of them. Arya read until her eyes burned. Luna Morgana, who negotiated peace between 3 warring packs. Luna Isadora, who saved her people from famine through clever trade agreements. Luna Celeste, who reformed cruel pack laws to protect the weak. Not one of them had earned respect through physical strength alone. They'd earned it through intelligence, compassion, and unshakable will. As evening fell, Lyra appeared with dinner and unexpected company. "You have a visitor," she said, stepping aside to reveal a young man with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "I'm Finn," he said, bowing slightly. "The castle healer. I heard you've been training with Commander Thorne and thought you might need." He held up a jar of salve. "Your hands." Arya looked down at her palms, raw, blistered, still seeping blood. "May I?" Finn asked gently. She nodded, extending her hands. Finn's touch was careful, clinical, as he cleaned the wounds and applied the salve. It smelled of herbs and moonlight, and the pain began to fade almost immediately. "You're being very brave," Finn said quietly. "The whole pack is talking about tomorrow. Most are betting you'll withdraw before the first trial even begins." "What are you betting?" Arya asked. Finn's smile widened. "That you'll surprise everyone. Cale doesn't make mistakes. If he chose you, there's a reason. The pack just needs to see it." After Finn left, Arya stood at her window, watching the castle prepare for tomorrow's trials. Banners were being hung, seating areas constructed. The entire pack would attend thousands of wolves, all watching to see if the broken Omega would fail. A knock at her door made her turn. Cale entered without waiting for permission, closing the door behind him. He looked different tonight, no formal regalia, just simple clothes that made him seem almost human. "Almost. You should be resting," he said. "I can't sleep." "Neither can I." He crossed to the window, standing beside her, close enough to touch, but not touching. "I want to tell you something. About my mate, about Alara." Arya's breath caught. He'd never spoken her name before. She was everything a Luna should be. Cale continued, his voice rough with old pain. "Strong, fierce, beautiful. The pack loved her. When she died, they mourned her like they'd lost the moon itself." "I can't replace her," Arya whispered. "I don't want you to." Cale finally looked at her, those golden eyes blazing in the darkness. Alara was perfect, but perfection can't be touched. It can't be questioned. It can't grow. His hand found hers, scarred fingers threading through hers. "You're real, Arya. Flawed and scared and imperfect. And that's exactly what I need. Someone who knows what it's like to fail, to hurt, to keep going anyway." "What if I fail tomorrow?" The question she'd been too afraid to ask. "Then we'll figure it out together." Cale raised her hand to his lips, kissing her torn palms with devastating gentleness. "But you won't fail. Do you know why?" "Why?" "Because you've been failing your entire life, and you're still here, still fighting. Failure doesn't scare you anymore. That makes you more dangerous than Seraphina could ever be." He left shortly after, but his words remained, wrapping around Arya like armor. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she studied until dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The day of the Queen's test had arrived. The grand arena was an ancient amphitheater carved into the mountain itself. Stone seats rose in concentric circles, and thousands of wolves packed them, their voices creating a roar like thunder. Banners bearing the Silverstone crest, a silver wolf beneath a full moon snapped in the wind. Arya stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She wore simple clothes, leather pants, a fitted tunic, boots meant for running. Her hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Across the chamber, separated by guards, Seraphina prepared. She wore elaborate armor, ceremonial, but functional, that made her look like a warrior goddess. Her auburn hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves. She was everything Arya wasn't: powerful, confident, born to lead. "First trial begins in 5 minutes, announced Beta Carson. The same man who'd auctioned Arya 3 days ago. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Lyra appeared at Arya's side, gripping her hand. "You've got this. Remember everything Elder Moira taught you." "And everything I taught you," Commander Thorne added, her scarred face fierce with pride. "Stand tall, speak clearly, don't let them see fear." The horns sounded 3 long blasts that shook the stone walls. "Competitors, to the arena." Arya climbed the stairs on shaking legs. Light hit her eyes blinding after the dim preparation chamber. The crowd's roar intensified, a wave of sound that crashed over her. The arena floor was a circle of packed earth, 50 feet across. At the far end, a raised platform held 3 chairs for the judges, Elder Moira, Commander Thorne, and a visiting alpha from a neighboring pack. And above them all, in a throne of black stone, sat Cale. His golden eyes found hers across the distance, and she felt the weight of his belief like a physical touch. Seraphina entered from the opposite side, and the crowd exploded with cheers. She raised her arms in acknowledgement, her wolf radiating through her skin, making her glow with power. Beta Carson stepped to the center of the arena, his voice magically amplified to carry to every seat. "Welcome to the Queen's Test. Today, 2 candidates compete for the honor of standing beside our Alpha King as Luna. The trials will test knowledge, endurance, and heart. There will be 3 trials in total. The candidate who succeeds in 2 of 3 will claim victory." He gestured to Seraphina. Lady Seraphina of House Nightshade. Born to nobility, trained in combat and law, possessing one of the strongest wolves in the territory. Cheers shook the arena. He turned to Arya. "Arya, of No House, Omega." Wolfless. The cheers died. In their place came whispers, jeers, scattered laughter. Arya's face burned, but she kept her spine straight, kept her chin up, just like Commander Thorne had taught her. "The first trial," Beta Carson announced, "tests knowledge of pack law. Each candidate will answer 5 questions of increasing difficulty. Incorrect answers result in elimination." He turned to Seraphina. "Lady Seraphina, your first question. What is the penalty for a rogue caught trespassing on pack lands? Death or exile?" "At the Alpha's discretion," Seraphina answered without hesitation, her voice strong and clear. "Correct." Beta Carson turned to Arya. "Arya, your first question. Under what circumstances can an Omega challenge a Beta for rank?" Arya's mind raced through everything she'd studied. If the Beta has committed 3 proven offenses against pack law, or if the Omega has performed a deed of exceptional valor recognized by the Alpha. Correct. The questions continued, growing harder. Seraphina answered each one perfectly, her confidence growing with every correct response. But Arya kept pace, drawing on 2 days of relentless study, until the 5th question. "Lady Seraphina," Beta Carson said, "what is the law of recognition?" Seraphina's confident expression flickered. "Just for a moment. The law of recognition states that an alpha has the right to choose their mate without pack approval, provided the mate is of appropriate rank and strength." "Incorrect." Elder Moira's voice rang out from the judge's platform. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Seraphina's face went pale, then red with fury. Beta Carson turned to Arya. "Arya, if you answer this question correctly, you win the first trial." "What is the law of recognition?" Arya's throat was dry, every eye in the arena fixed on her. Thousands of wolves, waiting for her to fail. She thought of Elder Moira's words, of Cale's belief, of Commander Thorne's scars, of 23 years of surviving. "The law of recognition," Arya said, her voice surprisingly steady, states, "A true alpha recognizes worth where others see weakness. A true Luna recognizes strength where others see broken. It means that a leader's value lies not in physical power, but in the ability to see potential where others see only flaws." Silence. Then Elder Moira stood. "Correct. The first trial goes to Arya." The arena exploded in chaos, shouts of disbelief, anger, scattered cheers. Seraphina's face twisted with rage, and on his throne, Cale smiled. "If Arya's journey moved you, subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Stories like these deserve an audience that cares." Comment. What would you do in Arya's position? Chapter 5. The Mountain Pass. The arena erupted in chaos. Wolves shouted from the stands, some cheering Arya's unexpected victory, others howling in outrage that a wolfless Omega had bested Lady Seraphina in the first trial. Seraphina herself stood frozen, her beautiful face contorted with disbelief and fury. Her wolf surged beneath her skin, making her eyes flash gold. For a moment, Arya thought she might attack right there in the arena. "Silence!" Cale's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. The command in it, the sheer alpha power, forced every wolf in the arena into instant submission. Even Seraphina lowered her head, though her hands clenched into fists. "The first trial has concluded fairly," Cale continued, his golden eyes sweeping the crowd. "Any wolf who questions the judgment questions me. Is that what you want?" The crowd fell into sullen quiet. No one dared challenge an Alpha King directly. Beta Carson stepped forward, his face carefully neutral. "We will take a 30-minute respite before the second trial begins. Competitors, return to your preparation chambers." Arya's legs nearly gave out as she walked back down the stairs. Adrenaline drained from her body, leaving her shaking and weak. She'd won. Somehow, impossibly, she'd won the first trial. But Seraphina's eyes followed her, burning with hatred that promised retribution. In the preparation chamber, Lyra threw her arms around Arya, nearly knocking her over. "You did it. Did you see Seraphina's face? I thought her head was going to explode." "One trial down," Commander Thorne said, more measured but with satisfaction in her voice. "2 to go. The next one will be harder. Seraphina won't underestimate you again." "What exactly is the second trial?" Arya asked, accepting water from Finn, who'd appeared with medical supplies. "The mountain pass," Thorne explained. "It's a test of endurance and survival. You'll be sent into the mountains alone, required to reach a checkpoint 3 miles away. The path includes steep climbs, narrow ledges, and various obstacles the pack has prepared." "What kind of obstacles?" "The kind meant to test whether you can survive without a wolf's strength." Thorne's expression was grave. "Normally, competitors would race. First one to the checkpoint wins. But given your situation, the rules have been modified. You'll each go separately. You just need to reach the checkpoint within the time limit." "How long?" 2 hours. Arya's stomach dropped. 3 miles through mountain terrain in 2 hours? With obstacles designed to challenge wolves? She'd been training for only 2 days. "You can do this," Lyra said fiercely, gripping Arya's shoulders. "You're stronger than you think. The climbing practice with Thorne will pay off." A horn blast signaled the end of the respite. When Arya returned to the arena, the atmosphere had changed. The crowd was quieter now, more watchful. They'd seen her succeed once. They weren't sure what to make of it. Beta Carson stood at the center of the arena. "The second trial begins now. Lady Seraphina will attempt the mountain pass first. Arya will follow after her completion." Smart, Arya thought. Let Seraphina set the standard. Show everyone how easily a strong wolf could complete the course, making Arya's attempt look pathetic by comparison. Seraphina stepped forward, her armor gleaming in the sunlight. She looked every inch the warrior Luna. "I dedicate this trial to the memory of Luna Alara," she announced loudly, her voice carrying to every seat. "May I prove worthy of following in her footsteps." The crowd roared approval. It was a calculated move invoking Cale's dead mate, reminding everyone of what a real Luna looked like. Arya glanced at Cale's throne. His expression was stone, giving nothing away. "Begin," Beta Carson shouted. Seraphina shifted mid-stride, her human form melting into that of a massive auburn wolf, easily 4 feet tall at the shoulder. She was magnificent, all rippling muscle and deadly grace. She took off toward the mountain path like an arrow released from a bow, disappearing into the forest in seconds. The arena had been positioned so spectators could see most of the mountain pass. Large viewing crystals magic that projected images showed Seraphina's progress as she bounded up the steep incline. She made it look effortless. Where the path narrowed to a ledge barely wide enough for a human to walk, she simply used her wolf's balance to trot across. When she reached a 20-foot cliff, she leaped and scrambled up it using claws that dug into stone. At a ravine spanned by a narrow rope bridge, she simply jumped, clearing the 30-foot gap in a single supernatural leap. The crowd cheered with each obstacle conquered. 47 minutes after starting, Serafina reached the checkpoint, a stone marker at the mountain's peak. She shifted back to human form, barely winded, and raised her arms in triumph. The arena shook with applause. When she returned to the arena floor, she walked straight to Arya, stopping inches away. "Let's see you match that, Omega," she hissed, low enough that only Arya could hear. "Let's see you survive what would take a real wolf less than an hour. Maybe you'll fall, maybe you'll fail. Maybe you'll finally understand that you don't belong here." Arya met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Maybe I'll surprise you." "Arya," Beta Carson called. "Take your position." Arya walked to the starting point, her heart hammering. 3 miles, 2 hours. She could do this. She had to. She looked up at Cale one last time. He leaned forward in his throne, his golden eyes locked on hers. He nodded once, a small gesture of absolute faith. "Begin." Arya ran. The first half-mile was just steep forest path, and she made good time, her training with Commander Thorne paying off. Her lungs burned, but she pushed through it. 1 foot in front of the other. Don't stop, don't think, just move. Then she hit the first real obstacle, the cliff Serafina had simply scrambled up using claws. Arya had no claws. She studied it, breathing hard. 20 feet of nearly sheer rock face. But there she spotted handholds, cracks in the stone, places where a human could climb if they were careful, methodical, brave enough to try. She started climbing. Her palms, barely healed from yesterday's training, split open again. Blood made her grip slippery. Her arms screamed. Halfway up, her foot slipped, and for a terrifying moment she hung by one hand, swinging over empty air. Don't look down. She found another foothold. Pulled herself up, inch by agonizing inch. When she finally dragged herself over the top, she lay gasping on the stone for precious seconds, her whole body shaking. No time. Keep moving. She forced herself up and ran. The narrow ledge came next. In the viewing crystals projected throughout the arena, the spectators watched her approach at a path barely 12 inches wide. With a 100-foot drop on one side, Serafina had trotted across in seconds. Arya pressed her back to the cliff wall and inched sideways, her eyes locked straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge the yawning emptiness beside her. A wind gust nearly knocked her loose. She grabbed at the rock face, nails scraping, and held on until it passed. Keep going. Minutes crawled by. Finally, she reached the other side. The viewing crystals showed the crowd's reactions. Some looked bored, this was taking too long. Others looked impressed? Surprised that she'd made it this far? The ravine loomed ahead, 30 feet across, spanned by that rope bridge. Serafina had jumped it. Arya couldn't jump it. She studied the bridge. It swayed in the wind, ropes frayed in places. It looked like it might collapse under a wolf's weight. But she wasn't a wolf. She was lighter, smaller. She stepped onto the first rope. It swung wildly. She grabbed the side ropes, holding on with bleeding hands, and took another step, and another. Halfway across, a rope snapped. The bridge lurched sideways, and Arya screamed, her feet slipping off the bottom rope. She hung by her hands alone, legs dangling over the ravine. The crowd gasped. In the arena, Lyra jumped to her feet. Even Serafina looked shocked. Arya's arms burned. She couldn't hold on. She was going to fall. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside her. That place that had survived 23 years of rejection, that had stood on an auction block and refused to bow, that had climbed into an Alpha King's carriage when every instinct screamed to run. No. I don't fall. Not here. Not now. Not ever again. With a scream of pure determination, Arya swung her legs up, hooked them around the bottom rope, and pulled herself back onto the bridge. She didn't stop to catch her breath. She just crawled fast and desperate until she reached the other side. She collapsed on solid ground, sobbing with relief and pain and exhaustion. But she wasn't done. The checkpoint was still half a mile away, and she'd already used 90 minutes. She had 30 minutes left. Arya stood on shaking legs and ran. The final stretch was uphill, brutal and unforgiving. Her vision swam. Her legs felt like they might give out with every step. Blood dripped from her hands, leaving a trail behind her. But she could see it now, the stone marker at the peak, the checkpoint. She ran harder. 20 minutes left. 15. The incline grew steeper. 10 minutes. Her lungs were on fire. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to stop, to give up, to accept that this was too much for a wolfless Omega. 5 minutes. The checkpoint was 50 feet away. Arya's vision tunneled. She couldn't feel her legs anymore. Couldn't feel anything but the desperate need to reach that marker. 20 feet. 10. 5. Arya's hand slammed against the stone checkpoint with seconds to spare. She collapsed beside it, unable to move, barely able to breathe. In the arena, the crowd exploded. Not just scattered cheers this time, genuine, thunderous applause that echoed off the mountains. Because a wolfless Omega had done what many thought impossible. She'd survived. They carried Arya back to the arena on a stretcher. Finn worked on her hands, muttering about infections and torn muscles. But Arya barely registered any of it. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. When they set the stretcher down in the arena, she insisted on standing. It took Lyra and Commander Thorne supporting her on either side, but she stood. Beta Carson stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Arya has completed the second trial within the time limit. However, he paused dramatically. The rules state that the trial must be completed, not merely survived. Lady Seraphina completed the course in 47 minutes. Arya took 1 hour and 59 minutes. The crowd murmured. Where was this going? Traditionally, the faster competitor would win, Beta Carson continued. But as the rules were modified for these trials, the judges must decide whether completion alone is sufficient, or whether speed should be a factor. All eyes turned to the judges' platform. Commander Thorne stood first. Arya completed every obstacle without using a wolf's advantages. No supernatural strength, no claws, no enhanced healing. That she finished it all is a greater feat than Seraphina's speed. I vote in Arya's favor. 1 vote. The visiting Alpha stood next. Seraphina demonstrated the qualities of a traditional Luna: strength, speed, dominance. The pack needs a leader who can move quickly in crisis. I vote for Seraphina. 1 vote each. Elder Moira rose last. The entire arena held its breath. I have lived for 97 years, the blind woman said, her voice carrying despite her age. I have seen 12 Lunas take their place beside Alpha Kings. Some were strong, some were fast, some were fierce warriors. She turned her unseeing eyes toward the crowd, but only 3 were truly great. Do you know what made them great? Silence. They refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. They endured when endurance seemed impossible. They survived not because they were strong, but because they chose to keep going when everything inside them screamed to stop. Elder Moira's walking stick tapped against stone. Today, I watched both competitors complete the trial. One made it look easy. The other made it look heroic. I vote for Arya. The arena erupted in chaos, half celebrating, half protesting. The second trial goes to Arya, Beta Carson announced over the din. The score is 2-0. Arya has won the Queen's test. No. Seraphina's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. I challenge the ruling. This is a mockery of tradition. She's wolfless. She can't be Luna. The trials are over, Lady Seraphina, Elder Moira said firmly. The results stand. Then I invoke the right of challenge. Seraphina's wolf burst through her skin in ripples of power. I challenge Arya to ritual combat. Winner takes the crown, as is my right under pack law. The crowd went silent. Arya felt the blood drain from her face. Ritual combat, a fight to submission or death. It was an ancient right, rarely invoked, but legal. And against Seraphina's wolf, Arya wouldn't last 30 seconds. On his throne, Cale rose, power radiating from him in waves that made the air shimmer. Lady Seraphina, it's her right. Arya's voice was quiet but clear. She stepped away from Lyra and Thorne's support, standing on her own despite her shaking legs. If she invokes the right of challenge, I must answer. That's pack law. Arya, no. Cale growled. You're injured. You can barely stand. This is suicide. Arya looked up at him. And for the first time since they'd met, She felt something other than fear. She felt certainty. 3 days ago, I was sold for less than livestock, she said. Today, I proved I could survive what most wolves can't. Tomorrow, she turned to face Seraphina, who smiled like a wolf scenting blood. I'll prove I deserve to stand beside a king. The crowd roared, and Arya knew that win or lose, she would never be invisible again. Chapter 6. The Challenge. The ritual combat would take place at dawn. Pack law required a full night between challenge and fight time, for the challenged party to prepare, to say goodbyes, to make peace with the moon goddess. Time to back down, though no one said that part aloud. Arya spent the night in her tower room, but she wasn't alone. Lyra paced like a caged animal, her usual cheerfulness replaced by frantic worry. This is insane. You can't fight her. She'll kill you in the first 30 seconds. Then I'll make those 30 seconds count, Arya said, wincing as Finn rewrapped her torn hands. This isn't a joke, Lyra snapped. Seraphina is a trained warrior. She has a wolf. She has years of combat experience. You have 2 days of rope climbing and a death wish. I have more than that. Arya looked at Commander Thorne, who stood by the window, silent and grim. Don't I? Thorne turned from the window, her scarred face unreadable. In a straight fight? No, she'll destroy you. Her wolf is one of the strongest in the territory. You have no supernatural advantages, no combat training beyond what I gave you in 2 days. But, Arya pressed, hearing the unspoken word, but ritual combat has rules. Thorne crossed to the table, spreading out a rough sketch of the arena. The fight takes place in the ring 50 feet across, no weapons, fight until submission or death. Seraphina will rely on her wolf, her strength, her speed. She'll try to end it quickly, humiliate you in front of the pack. How do I stop her? You don't. Thorne's eyes met hers. You can't match her strength, so don't try. Instead, you make her strength work against her. You survive. Every second you stay standing is a victory she didn't expect. Every time she knocks you down and you get back up, you prove something she can't understand, that there's a strength that has nothing to do with claws and fangs. You're telling her to just get beaten? Lyra's voice cracked. To let Seraphina destroy her? I'm telling her to do what she's always done. Thorne looked at Arya with something that might have been respect. Survive. Endure. Refuse to quit. Seraphina has never fought someone who couldn't be broken by pain. She doesn't know what to do with an opponent who won't stay down. A knock at the door interrupted them. Finn moved to answer it, then stepped back quickly. Cale entered. He'd changed from his formal regalia into simple clothes, black pants, a loose shirt. But the power that radiated from him made the air feel thick and charged. Everyone out, he said quietly. Lyra looked ready to protest, but Commander Thorne grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. Finn followed, gathering his medical supplies. In moments, Arya and Cale were alone. He stood by the door, hands clenched at his sides, and for the first time since she'd met him, Arya saw fear in his golden eyes. I could stop this, he said. As Alpha King, I could invalidate the challenge, declare the trial sufficient, name you Luna without, and the pack would never accept it. Arya finished. They'd say you bent the rules for a wolfless Omega, that you weakened tradition. They'd resent me forever, resent you for choosing me. I don't care. Cale crossed the room in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. Let them resent. Let them rage. I won't watch you die for their approval. It's not about their approval. Arya reached up, placing her torn hands against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms. It's about mine. For 23 years, I accepted what everyone told me, that I was broken, worthless, nothing. 3 days ago, you told me I was wrong. You showed me I had worth. Her voice strengthened. But I still didn't believe it. Not really, not in my bones. I was just playing a role, pretending to be someone worthy of standing beside a king. Tomorrow morning, in that ring, I'm going to find out if it's true, if I really am more than what they made me believe I was. And if you're not? Cale's voice was raw. If she kills you, then at least I'll die knowing I tried. Arya smiled, sad and certain. That's more than the girl on the auction block 3 days ago could have said. Cale's control broke. He pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. She felt him shaking, this powerful alpha king who commanded thousands, trembling like a man watching his world collapse. "I can't lose you," he whispered into her hair. "Not like I lost Alara. Not when I just found you." Arya held him, this broken king who'd seen worth where everyone else saw nothing. "You won't lose me. I promise." "Don't make promises you can't keep." "Then let me make one I can." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "I promise that tomorrow morning, I will step into that ring. I will face Seraphina, and I will not quit. Not while there's breath in my body. That much," her voice caught, "that much I can promise." Cale's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. I'm terrified." "I know. That's what makes it bravery." His golden eyes searched hers. "Arya, if tomorrow goes badly, if the worst happens, I need you to know something." "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say goodbye." "Not yet. I'm not saying goodbye." He leaned his forehead against hers. "I'm saying that in 3 days, you've changed everything. You've reminded me what it feels like to hope, to want something beyond duty and revenge and endless political games. You've made me feel—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Feel what?" Arya asked softly. "Alive." The word was barely a breath. "For the first time since Alara died, I feel alive." Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they couldn't say aloud. Fear and hope and need, and the terrible knowledge that this might be their only chance. Arya kissed him back with equal desperation, pouring everything she felt into it. All the loneliness and fear and new, fragile hope that he'd awakened in her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Win," Cale said, his voice rough. "However, you have to do it. Whatever it takes. Win, and come back to me. I will." Another promise she might not be able to keep? "I will." He stayed until the sky began to lighten with pre-dawn gray, holding her in silence, neither willing to acknowledge that these might be their last quiet moments together. Finally, he pulled away. "I have to take my place on the throne before the pack gathers. They need to see me impartial, even though—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Even though I'd burn the entire world down to keep you safe." After he left, Arya stood at the window, watching the castle come alive. Thousands of wolves gathered in the arena, filling every seat. They'd come to watch a spectacle. The wolfless Omega versus the warrior. David versus Goliath. Except in this version, David had no sling and Goliath had razor-sharp teeth. Lyra returned, bringing a simple fighting tunic, reinforced leather, flexible but protective. "Commander Thorne sent this. It won't stop a wolf's claws, but it's better than nothing." Arya dressed in silence, her hands shaking only a little as she laced the tunic. When she was ready, she turned to face her friend. Lyra's eyes were red. "I should tell you some inspiring speech about believing in yourself and never giving up. But I'm terrified." Lyra's voice cracked. "I'm terrified. I'm about to watch my friend die." Arya pulled her into a hug. "Then don't watch. Close your eyes if it gets bad. But please," her own voice broke. "Please be there. I need to know someone's in my corner. Even if I'll be there." Lyra held her tighter. "I'll be there until the end. Whatever that end is." The horn sounded 3 long blasts, calling the combatants to the arena. It was time. The walk from the preparation chamber to the arena floor felt like a march to execution. Commander Thorne walked on Arya's right, Lyra on her left. Finn followed behind, carrying medical supplies, though they all knew that if this went badly, medical supplies wouldn't matter. The crowd's roar hit like a physical wave as Arya stepped into the arena. The morning sun was just cresting the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and blood red. Across the ring, Seraphina waited. She'd forgone armor, wearing only a simple fighting dress that would tear away easily when she shifted. Her auburn hair was braided back, her wolf eyes glowed with anticipation and hatred. In his throne, Cale sat rigid as stone, his face a mask of cold neutrality. Only someone who'd held him trembling in the night would recognize the fear in the tension of his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on his throne's arms. Beta Carson stepped to the center of the ring. The right of challenge has been invoked. Arya and Lady Seraphina will fight until one submits or dies. Are both combatants willing? I am, Seraphina said, her voice carrying confidence. I am, Arya said, surprised by how steady she sounded. Then by pack law and ancient right. Beta Carson raised his hand. Begin! Seraphina shifted immediately, her human form exploding into that of a massive wolf. She was even bigger than Arya remembered, 4.5 feet at the shoulder, all muscle and deadly grace. Her fangs were easily 4 inches long. Arya had no wolf to meet her with. She just stood there, human and small and impossibly fragile against that supernatural predator. Seraphina circled, taking her time, letting the crowd see the size difference, letting Arya's fear build. The wolf's lips pulled back in a snarl that might have been a smile. Then, she attacked. Seraphina lunged with speed no human could match, jaws aimed at Arya's throat. In the split second before impact, Arya remembered Commander Thorne's words. Don't try to match her strength. Arya dropped and rolled. Seraphina's jaws snapped shut on empty air. The wolf skidded, turned, attacked again. This time her claws caught Arya's arm, shredding the leather tunic and the skin beneath. Pain exploded, white-hot and blinding. Arya stumbled back, blood streaming down her arm. The crowd roared. Seraphina didn't give her time to recover. She charged again, and this time there was nowhere to dodge. The wolf's massive body slammed into Arya, throwing her backward. She hit the ground hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. Seraphina's jaws closed around Arya's shoulder, not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to make Arya scream. Submit. Seraphina's voice growled in her mind, the mental connection all wolves could share. Submit, and I'll let you live. Keep fighting, and I'll tear you apart slowly. Arya's hand scrabbled in the dirt, finding a rock the size of her fist. She swung it with everything she had, slamming it into the side of Seraphina's head. The wolf yelped and released her, staggering back. It hadn't done real damage, couldn't, against a wolf's thick skull, but it had surprised her. Arya rolled away, clutching her bleeding shoulder, and forced herself to stand. Blood dripped onto the arena floor. Her arm hung uselessly. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire, but she was standing. Is that all? Arya gasped, staring at the wolf. 20 years of training, and you can't put down one wolfless Omega? Seraphina snarled, rage replacing calculation in her glowing eyes. Good, Arya thought. Angry opponents make mistakes. The wolf charged again, faster this time, driven by fury rather than strategy. Arya waited until the last possible second, then threw herself sideways. Seraphina crashed past her, and Arya grabbed a handful of fur as she rolled, using the wolf's own momentum to throw herself onto Seraphina's back. For 3 seconds, she clung there, and the crowd went absolutely silent in shock. Then Seraphina bucked like a wild horse, and Arya went flying. She hit the ground so hard she felt ribs crack. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The world spun in nauseating circles. Through her swimming vision, she saw Seraphina stalking toward her, confident now. The game was over. Time to end the broken Omega. Arya tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't respond. Her ribs screamed with every attempted breath. This is it, she thought. This is where I die. She thought of Cale's kiss, of Lyra's tears, of Commander Thorne saying survival was its own victory. No, not yet, not like this. With a scream that was half pain and half pure defiance, Arya forced herself to her knees. Blood poured from her wounds. Her vision blurred, but she was kneeling, not lying down, not defeated. I won't quit, she gasped, looking up at the massive wolf looming over her. Kill me if you want, but you'll never make me quit. Something changed in the arena, a shift in the atmosphere, in the crowd's energy. Even in Seraphina's glowing eyes, uncertainty flickered there now. Because Arya should have been broken, should have submitted 10 minutes ago, but she was still kneeling, still defiant, still refusing to accept defeat. And suddenly, Seraphina didn't look like the victor anymore. She looked like someone who couldn't break an unarmed, wounded opponent. She looked weak. Chapter 7. The Wolf Within. Seraphina's wolf paced around Arya's kneeling form, confusion and fury warring in those glowing eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The wolfless Omega should have submitted by now, should be cowering and begging for mercy. Instead, Arya lifted her head higher, meeting the wolf's gaze despite the blood streaming down her face from a cut above her eye. "What are you waiting for?" Arya's voice was hoarse but clear, carrying to every seat in the silent arena. "I'm right here, helpless. Beaten. End it." Seraphina snarled, circling closer. Her jaws opened, fangs gleaming in the morning sunday. But she didn't strike. The crowd began to murmur. Whispers rippled through the stands like wind through grass. "Why isn't she finishing it? The Omega won't submit. Look at her, still defiant." Arya understood what was happening. Seraphina had expected a quick victory, a demonstration of dominance that would prove wolves belonged in power. Not wolfless Omegas. But every second Arya remained kneeling, broken but unbeaten, that narrative crumbled. "Finish it," someone shouted from the crowd. "Put her down," another voice called. But other voices rose in opposition. "She won't quit. 20 minutes, and still fighting. Maybe the wolfless girl does have strength. Maybe the wolfless girl does have strength." Seraphina's wolf threw back her head and howled a sound of frustration and rage. Then she charged, no longer calculated, just pure fury seeking to destroy what refused to break. This time, Arya didn't try to dodge. She couldn't. Her body had nothing left. Instead, as the massive wolf lunged, Arya did something insane. She lunged too. Not away. Toward. Her remaining good arm reached out, and in the split second before impact, her fingers found Seraphina's throat, not the fur, but the vulnerable patch beneath the jaw where major arteries pulsed. She squeezed, not with wolf strength, not with supernatural power, but with every ounce of desperate, stubborn, refusing to die determination she possessed. Seraphina's momentum carried them both to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fur. The wolf thrashed, trying to throw Arya off, but Arya held on with grim desperation, her fingers digging into that vulnerable spot, cutting off air. It wasn't enough to kill. Wouldn't be, not against a wolf's thick hide and superior strength, but it was enough to shock, enough to show that even at the edge of death, the wolfless Omega would fight back. Seraphina bucked hard, and Arya's grip broke. She flew backward, slamming into the arena wall. Something else cracked her collarbone this time. The pain was beyond description, but she didn't scream. She saved her breath for standing. Somehow, impossibly, Arya forced her broken body upright. She swayed, vision darkening at the edges. Blood covered her from head to toe now, her own and Seraphina's mixing together. Across the ring, Seraphina had shifted back to human form, one hand clutched to her throat, breathing hard. Her perfect face was twisted with something that might have been fear. "What are you?" Seraphina gasped. "What kind of creature won't die?" Arya took one step forward, then another. Each movement was agony, but she didn't stop. "I'm someone," Arya said, her voice raw, "who has been dying her entire life. Every day they called me broken. Every night I prayed to a goddess who didn't answer. Every moment I existed as less than nothing in a world that wanted me gone." Another step. Blood dripped with each movement. "You think this pain is new to me?" Arya laughed, and the sound was half mad. "I've been in pain since I was 6 years old, and my wolf never came. This," she gestured at her broken body, "this is just more visible." The arena had gone completely silent. Thousands of wolves watching a wolfless Omega refuse to fall. "I've survived 23 years of what you're trying to do to me in 20 minutes, Arya continued. "You can break my bones. You can tear my flesh. You can kill me. But you will never, ever make me quit." Something flickered across Seraphina's face. Not quite respect, but recognition, of meeting something she didn't understand. Then Seraphina's wolf surged forward again, and she shifted mid-stride, going for the kill shot this time. No more toying, no more hesitation, just teeth aimed at Arya's throat. Arya didn't have time to dodge, didn't have the strength. This was it, the final moment. In that split second before impact, something strange happened. The world slowed. Arya felt something deep inside her chest, Something that had been dormant, silent, sleeping for 23 years. Wake up, she thought desperately. If you're in there. If you've ever been in there. Wake up. Now. Serafina's jaws closed around her throat. And stopped. Not because Serafina changed her mind. Because something was holding her back. A force. A pressure. An invisible shield of pure will between predator and prey. The arena erupted in gasps and shouts. What is that? Do you see it? The air around her, it's shimmering. Arya felt it too. Power flowing through her veins, but not wolf power. Something else. Something ancient and foreign and completely her own. Serafina staggered back, her wolf's eyes wide with shock. She'd bitten down on something solid, not flesh, but energy. Impossible. Serafina shifted back to human, pointing at Arya with a shaking hand. You're wolfless. You can't have power. You can't. A voice cut through the arena like thunder. She doesn't need a wolf. Everyone turned. Elder Moira stood at the edge of the ring, her blind eyes somehow seeing everything. Because she has something rarer. Something we haven't seen in 300 years. The old woman raised her walking stick, pointing directly at Arya. She has a guardian spirit, the moon goddess's own protection, given to those whose souls are pure enough to survive what would break anyone else. The crowd exploded in chaos, voices shouting over each other. A guardian spirit? But those are just legends. I saw the shield, it was real. Arya stood frozen, not understanding. A guardian spirit? She'd read about them in the old texts, ancient magic supposedly granted by the moon goddess to protect those she favored. But they were myths, children's tales, weren't they? The challenge is over. Elder Moira's voice commanded silence. Arya has proven her worth beyond any doubt. She may not have a wolf, but she has the moon goddess's own favor. That makes her more than worthy to be Luna. No, Serafina's voice cracked with desperation. She's wolfless. She can't produce strong heirs. She can't. Can't what? Cale's voice froze everyone in place. He descended from his throne, and now stood at the edge of the ring, power radiating from him in waves that made even the strongest wolves step back. Can't be what you expected? Cale continued, his golden eyes fixed on Serafina. Can't fit into the narrow definition you've decided a Luna must meet? Tell me, Lady Serafina, when you look at that girl standing in a pool of her own blood, refusing to fall despite impossible odds, what do you see? Serafina said nothing. I'll tell you what I see, Cale said, and now he looked at Arya. I see the strongest wolf I've ever met. She doesn't need fangs because her will is sharper than any teeth. She doesn't need claws because her determination cuts deeper than any blade. He stepped into the ring, walking past Serafina without a glance, stopping in front of Arya. Up close. She could see his eyes weren't cold anymore. They blazed with fierce pride and something else, something that made her chest ache. You proved it, he said softly, meant only for her. You proved you're exactly what this pack needs. Arya swayed, suddenly aware of how much blood she'd lost. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only pain and exhaustion. I think, she started to say. Then the world tilted sideways. Cale caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Finn! He roared. Now! The healer rushed forward with his supplies, but Cale was already carrying Arya out of the arena, his strides eating up distance. Behind them, the crowd's roar finally broke through, not jeers this time, but cheers. Genuine, thunderous applause for the wolfless Omega who'd done the impossible. But Arya barely heard it. Her vision was darkening, consciousness slipping away. The last thing she saw before the world went black was Cale's face above hers, those golden eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. And the last thing she heard was his voice, rough with fear and relief. Don't you dare die on me, not after everything. Stay with me, Arya. Stay. Then darkness claimed her, gentle and complete. Arya woke to softness, silk sheets, the scent of healing herbs, distant voices murmuring, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains. She tried to move and gasped. Pain lanced through her entire body, sharp and immediate. Easy. A warm hand pressed gently against her shoulder, keeping her still. You have 3 cracked ribs, a broken collarbone, multiple lacerations, and you lost enough blood that Finn thought we'd lost you twice. Arya turned her head slowly, even that hurt to find Kyle sitting beside her bed. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his formal clothes were rumpled and blood-stained. "How long?" she croaked, her throat raw. 2 days. Cale's hand moved from her shoulder to her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. Finn worked himself to exhaustion, keeping you alive. The entire castle has been holding its breath." 2 days. Arya tried to process that. "The challenge did I. You won." A smile cracked Cale's exhausted face. "You magnificent, stubborn, impossible woman, you won. Seraphina conceded the moment you manifested that shield. She left the territory this morning, too humiliated to face the pack after failing to defeat a wolfless Omega." Memory came flooding back. The fight, the pain, and that strange moment when something inside her had awakened. "The guardian spirit," Arya whispered. "Elder Moira said, is it real? Was that real?" Cale's expression grew serious. "Elder Moira believes so. She says guardian spirits are the moon goddess's way of protecting those whose paths are meant to change the world. They manifest in moments of extreme need, when someone with a pure heart faces impossible odds. But I'm wolfless. Why would the goddess?" "Maybe that's exactly why." Cale's thumb brushed her cheek. "Maybe the goddess knew you'd need something else, something uniquely yours." Arya's hand moved to her chest, searching for that strange feeling she'd felt in the arena. It was still there, faint, dormant, but present, like a sleeping animal curled around her heart. "What happens now?" she asked. Cale's smile widened. "Now, you rest and heal. And when you're strong enough," he leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, "you become my Luna, my queen, my mate, if you'll still have me." Arya's breath caught. "You're asking? After everything, the auction, the trials, nearly dying, you're still asking?" "Always." Cale's golden eyes held hers with absolute certainty. "Because choice matters. You fought for the right to stand beside me. Now I'm giving you the choice. Do you want to?" Did she want to be queen? To rule beside this powerful, broken king? To face a pack that might never fully accept her? To spend her life proving she was more than the limitations placed on her? Arya thought of the girl on the auction block 3 days ago, the one who'd believed she was worth less than livestock, the one who'd never imagined she could be anything more than broken. That girl was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who'd survived impossible trials. Someone who'd stared down death and refused to blink. Someone who'd finally learned her own worth. "Yes," Arya said, and felt the words settle into her bones like truth. "I want to stand beside you, not because you chose me, but because I choose this. Choose you. Choose to be more than what I was told I could be." Cale's smile was brilliant and devastating. "Then when you heal, we'll have the Luna ceremony. In front of the entire pack, I'll claim you as mine, and you'll claim me as yours. And anyone who objects," his expression darkened with promise, "will answer to me." He leaned down and kissed her, careful of her injuries, gentle as morning light, but full of promise and hope, and a future neither of them had dared imagine a week ago. When he pulled back, Arya saw Lyra hovering in the doorway, her face tear-streaked and happy. "She's awake." Lyra rushed forward, then stopped herself before throwing her arms around Arya. "Sorry. Finn said no hugging until your ribs heal, but I'm so glad I thought when you collapsed." "I'm okay," Arya said, reaching out with her good hand. Lyra grabbed it, holding tight. "You're not okay. You're incredible. The whole territory is talking about you. The wolfless Omega, who faced down a warrior and won. Songs are being written. Stories are spreading. You're becoming a legend." "I don't want to be a legend," Arya said tiredly. "I just want to be me." Too late. Commander Thorne appeared in the doorway, her scarred face creased with approval. "You're a symbol now. Every weak wolf, every outcast, every Omega who's been told they're nothing, they all saw you refuse to quit. You gave them hope. That's what legends do." Over the next few days, as Arya healed, she began to understand what Thorne meant. Wolves came to visit not nobles or warriors, but the ones society overlooked. Omegas who'd been abused, beta wolves with disabilities, even a few who'd lost their wolves to injury or curse, like Thorn had. They came to thank her, to tell her their stories, to say that watching her fight had changed something in them. One young Omega girl, barely 15, came with her mother. "I was going to accept an arranged mating with a cruel alpha," she whispered, "because I thought I had no choice, no worth beyond who would claim me. But you showed me. You showed me I can choose. I can say no. I can be more." Arya held the girl's hand and fought back tears. "You always could. You always were more. I just made it visible." As the week passed and her body slowly healed, Arya realized something fundamental had shifted, not just in her, but in the entire pack dynamic. The strong wolves, the warriors, and nobles still looked at her with wariness, some with resentment. They didn't like what she represented, that strength could come from unexpected places. But the others, the overlooked, the underestimated, the broken, they looked at her with something else: hope. And maybe that was what a true Luna was supposed to provide. Not just strength or beauty or perfect heirs, but hope that even the least of them could become something more. Chapter 8. The Luna Ceremony. The Luna Ceremony was set for the full moon, 7 days after Arya's victory in the arena. Those 7 days passed in a blur of preparation, healing, and growing anxiety. Finn declared her ribs healed enough to stand through the ceremony, though she still wore bandages under her clothes. The scars would remain jagged lines across her shoulder and arm, permanent reminders of how close she'd come to death. Lyra called them victory marks, and refused to let Arya feel shame about them. The ceremony itself would take place in the Grand Hall, the same place where Arya had been auctioned just 2 weeks ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The girl sold for less than livestock would return as queen. "Stop fidgeting," Lyra scolded, adjusting the coronet of silver flowers woven into Arya's hair. "You look stunning." And Arya stared at her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress was midnight blue silk that flowed like water, embroidered with silver wolves that seemed to move in the candlelight. Her silver hair had been styled in intricate braids. Someone had applied cosmetics that made her pale skin glow, and her gray eyes look like storm clouds. She looked like a queen. She felt like an imposter. "What if I mess up the vows?" Arya asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her for days. "What if I say the wrong words, or—" "Then you'll stumble through them like every other nervous person who's ever taken sacred vows," Lyra said firmly. "Arya, you survived trials that should have killed you. You faced down a warrior wolf with nothing but stubbornness and will. You can handle some ceremonial words." A knock at the door interrupted them. Elder Moira entered, moving with surprising grace despite her age and blindness. "Leave us," she told Lyra. When they were alone, the old woman approached Arya, her milky eyes somehow fixed directly on her face. "You're afraid," Elder Moira said. "It wasn't a question." "Terrified," Arya admitted. "Not of the ceremony. After. Of failing. Of not being enough. Of letting down everyone who's put their hope in me." "Good." Elder Moira's wrinkled hand found Arya's. "Only fools face great responsibility without fear. But let me tell you something about the wolves gathering in that hall tonight." She squeezed Arya's hand gently. "Half of them still don't believe you belong here. They think Cale made a mistake, that you're a weakness the pack must tolerate. The other half see you as a symbol of something larger than yourself, hope for the overlooked." "That's what I'm afraid of," Arya whispered. "Being a symbol. Symbols aren't allowed to be human, to fail, to be scared. Then don't be a symbol." Elder Moira smiled. "Be Arya. Be the girl who refused to quit. Be flawed and scared and human, and let them see that strength doesn't require perfection. That's a lesson this pack desperately needs to learn." The old woman reached into her robes and pulled out a small pendant silver, shaped like a crescent moon with a wolf silhouette inside it. "This belonged to the first Luna of Silverstone," Elder Moira said, fastening it around Arya's neck. "Luna Morgana. She was an Omega too, chosen not for her strength but for her wisdom. She wore this through 50 years of rule, and every Luna since has worn it during their ceremony. Now, it's yours. Arya touched the pendant, feeling the weight of history and expectation. I have a gift for you too, Elder Moira continued. A truth I've kept from everyone, even Cale. That guardian spirit that manifested during your fight with Seraphina? It wasn't a temporary protection. Arya's heart skipped. What do you mean? I mean it's permanent. It's part of you now, as much as a wolf would be. The moon goddess has marked you as hers, given you power that has nothing to do with shifting or fangs. Elder Moira's expression grew serious, but that power comes with responsibility, with a purpose. And I believe that purpose is to change what it means to be Luna, to redefine strength for this pack. Before Arya could respond, Lyra burst back into the room. It's time. The hall is full. Cale is waiting. Arya's stomach dropped. This was it. No more delays. No more preparation. Time to become a queen. The grand hall had been transformed. Thousands of candles cast dancing shadows on the walls. Garlands of silver flowers, moon blooms, sacred to the moon goddess, draped from the ceiling. Every wolf in the territory had gathered, packing the hall so tightly that guards had to enforce pathways. Arya stood at the entrance, hidden behind heavy curtains, listening to the crowd's murmur. Her hands trembled despite her best efforts to steady them. Ready? Commander Thorne appeared beside her, dressed in full ceremonial armor. She would be Arya's escort, a role traditionally filled by the Luna's father, but Arya had no family. Thorne had volunteered without hesitation. No, Arya admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Thorne's scarred face creased with approval. That's the spirit. Remember, spine straight, eyes forward, and if anyone looks at you with contempt, stare them down until they look away. You're about to become their queen. Make them remember it. The ceremonial drums began deep, rhythmic beats that echoed through the hall like a heartbeat. The curtains parted. Arya stepped through. Every face in the hall turned toward her. Thousands of eyes, some curious, some hostile, some filled with hope. The weight of their attention pressed down like physical force. Don't faint. Don't stumble. Don't show fear. Arya lifted her chin and walked forward. Thorne, a solid presence beside her. The center aisle stretched for what felt like miles. Wolves lined both sides, warriors, nobles, merchants. Omegas. All silent now, watching the wolfless girl who would be their Luna. Some faces were familiar. Finn, the healer, smiled encouragingly. Lyra stood near the front, tears already streaming down her face. Beta Carson looked resigned. He'd opposed her appointment, but wouldn't defy his king. And at the end of the aisle, standing before an altar carved with running wolves, waited Cale. He wore formal regalia, black leather and silver, his Alpha King authority radiating from him in waves that made the air shimmer. His dark hair was pulled back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. Those golden eyes locked onto Arya the moment she appeared, and everything else faded. The crowd, the ceremony, the fear, all of it disappeared until there was just him, watching her walk toward him with an expression that made her chest ache. Pride, wonder, love. She reached the altar, and Thorne stepped back, leaving Arya to face Cale alone. Elder Moira stood between them, her blind eyes seeing everything. We gather under the full moon to witness the bonding of Alpha and Luna, of king and queen, of two souls choosing to walk the path forward together. She turned to the crowd. The Luna vows are sacred. They cannot be taken lightly, nor can they be broken without consequence. Arya, do you understand what you're accepting? I do, Arya said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. Then speak the old words. Arya had memorized them during her week of healing. Now she spoke them, her voice growing stronger with each line. I vow to stand beside you in darkness and light, to be your counsel when wisdom is needed, your strength when courage falters, your peace when rage threatens to consume. I vow to protect this pack with my life, to value the least among us as much as the greatest, to rule with justice tempered by mercy. She paused, then added words that weren't part of the traditional vows, words that came from her heart. I vow to prove every day that strength comes in many forms. That worth isn't measured by claws and fangs, but by the content of our character and the choices we make. I vow to be the Luna this pack needs, even if I'm not the Luna they expected. The hall erupted in whispers. Changing the sacred vows was unprecedented, but Cale smiled fierce and proud and began his own vows. I vow to honor you above all others, to defend you with my life and my power, to see your worth even when others are blind to it. His golden eyes burned into hers. I vow to be worthy of the strength you've shown, the courage you've demonstrated, the hope you've given to those who had none. He reached out, taking her hands in his. I vow to love you, Arya, not despite your differences, but because of them, because you've shown me that the broken pieces of ourselves can fit together to make something whole. Arya's eyes burned with unshed tears. Elder Moira raised her hands. By the power granted to me by the Moon Goddess, by the authority of pack law, by the will of the Alpha King, and the choice of this woman, I declare Arya to be Luna of Silverstone, Queen of the Northern Territories. Mate to the Alpha King. She produced 2 silver cuffs, ceremonial, engraved with ancient symbols. She fastened one around Arya's wrist, one around Cale's. These cuffs symbolize the bond you've chosen. They cannot be broken by force, only by mutual decision to release each other. Wear them as a reminder that you chose this path together. The old woman stepped back. It is customary for the Alpha to claim his Luna before the pack, to mark her as his and seal the bond. Cale moved closer, and Arya's heart hammered. She knew what came next. The claiming bite. An Alpha would bite his Luna's neck, marking her with his scent and power, binding them together in a way that went beyond human marriage. But she had no wolf to complete the bond. Would it even work? Cale leaned down, his lips close to her ear. Trust me, he whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Then his mouth moved to her neck, to the point where her pulse jumped wildly beneath her skin. He bit down, not hard enough to break skin deeply, but enough to mark, to claim. Power exploded through Arya Cale's alpha energy, rushing into her like a flood. She gasped, her body rigid with the force of it. But instead of the bond breaking against her wolfless nature, something else happened. That sleeping thing in her chest, the guardian spirit, woke fully. It rose to meet Cale's power, twining with it, accepting it, weaving together until Arya couldn't tell where his energy ended and hers began. The air around them began to glow, a soft silver light that grew brighter and brighter until the entire hall was illuminated. The crowd gasped. Even Elder Moira looked shocked. Impossible, someone whispered. The bond actually took. She's glowing, the Moon Goddess's blessing. Cale pulled back, his eyes wide with wonder. Arya, she felt it. The bond. Real and solid and unbreakable, connecting her to Cale in a way that went beyond words. She could feel his emotions, his fierce joy, his overwhelming relief that the bond had actually formed, his love crashing over her in waves. And he could feel hers, the fear that still lingered, the determination underneath it, the growing certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. It worked, Arya breathed. How? Because love doesn't require a wolf, Elder Moira said, her voice filled with awe. Because the Moon Goddess recognizes true bonds, regardless of how they're formed. You and Cale are mated, truly mated. The first Alpha and Luna bonded across the barrier of wolf and human. The hall erupted in chaos, cheers and shouts, and the howling of hundreds of wolves celebrating their new Luna. Cale pulled Arya into his arms, lifting her off her feet, and kissed her in front of everyone. It was claiming and celebration and promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale turned to face the crowd, keeping Arya tucked against his side. Behold your Luna, he roared. His alpha command, making every wolf in the hall straighten to attention. Queen Arya Silverstone, my mate, my equal. And anyone who questions her place will answer to me. The cheers intensified, though Arya could still see some faces twisted with resentment. The battle for acceptance wasn't over. It might never be truly over. But for the first time since the auction 2 weeks ago, Arya felt something settle in her chest. Certainty. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. Wasn't just surviving day to day. She was Luna. She was queen. She was mated to an Alpha King who saw her worth. And she was finally, impossibly, home. The celebration feast lasted until dawn. Long tables groaned under the weight of food, roasted meats, fresh breads, fruits that sparkled with magical preservation, wines that tasted like bottled starlight. Musicians played on a raised platform, their music alternating between traditional pack songs and modern melodies. Arya sat beside Cale at the head table, overwhelmed by the attention. Wolves approached in an endless stream, nobles offering congratulations, some genuine, some clearly forced. Warriors pledging their loyalty, Omegas thanking her with tears in their eyes. "You're doing beautifully," Cale murmured during a brief lull, his hand finding hers under the table. Through their new bond, she felt his pride and love washing over her. "I'm terrified I'll say something wrong," she admitted. "Then you'll apologize and correct it. You're allowed to make mistakes, Arya. You're Luna, not perfect." A young Omega boy approached the table, barely 10 years old, holding a crudely made flower crown. "For the Luna," he said shyly, offering it up. Arya's throat tightened. She took the crown made of wildflowers and tied together with grass and placed it on her head, right over the expensive silver coronet. "It's perfect," she told him. "The best gift I've received all night." The boy's face lit up with joy, and as he ran back to his mother, Arya caught Cale watching her with an expression that made her blush. "What?" she asked. "You," he said simply. "You're going to change everything. Do you know that?" Before she could respond, a commotion at the hall's entrance drew everyone's attention. A messenger burst in, mud-splattered and breathing hard. "Alpha King, urgent news from the eastern border." The music stopped. The crowd fell silent. Cale rose, his expression shifting from loving mate to commanding king in an instant. "Speak." "Rogues, your majesty. A massive pack, at least 200 strong. They've attacked 3 border villages in the past 2 days. They're organized, armed, and they're moving toward the heart of the territory." The hall erupted in shouts and questions. 200 rogues?" Someone yelled. "That's an army. We need to mobilize the warriors. Protect the villages." Cale's alpha command silenced them all. "Commander Thorne, mobilize the King's Guard. Beta Carson, send runners to all 5 packs. I want every available warrior at the eastern border by dawn." He turned to Arya, and through their bond, she felt his conflict duty warring with his desire to stay and protect her on their bonding night. "Go," she said before he could speak. "Your pack needs you." "Arya, I'm Luna now," she said firmly, standing to face him. "Which means I understand that duty comes before celebration. Go stop those rogues. I'll be here when you return." Pride and love blazed in his golden eyes. He pulled her close and kissed her deep and fierce and full of promise. "I'll return as soon as I can," he said against her lips. "Don't do anything reckless while I'm gone." "Me? Reckless?" Despite the tension, Arya managed a smile. "When have I ever been reckless?" Cale laughed short and sharp, then turned to his warriors. "With me, we ride in 10 minutes." The hall emptied rapidly as warriors rushed to prepare. Within minutes, most of the guests had left. The celebration forgotten in the face of danger, Arya stood in the suddenly quiet hall, still wearing her coronet and the wildflower crown, and felt the weight of her new position settle on her shoulders. Somewhere out there, 200 rogues threatened her pack. Her pack. The thought sent a chill through her. These wolves were her responsibility now, as much as Cale's. "Come on," Lyra said, appearing at her side. "Let's get you out of that dress and into something you can actually breathe in. Something tells me sleep won't come easy tonight." As they left the hall, Arya glanced back at Cale's empty throne and made herself a promise. She would prove worthy of this position. Would protect these wolves who'd given her a chance, however reluctantly some had done so. She was Luna now, and that meant everything had changed. Chapter 9. The Rogue Army. 3 days passed with no word from the eastern border. 3 days of Arya pacing the castle halls, feeling useless and afraid. Through the mate bond, she could sense Cale distant but alive, focused and tense. But the bond was too new for detailed communication. She knew he was fighting, knew he was unharmed so far, but nothing more. The castle felt empty without him, without the warriors. Most of the King's Guard had gone to the border, leaving only a skeleton crew to protect the castle and surrounding villages. Arya spent those days trying to be useful. She met with the remaining council members, learned about supply chains and food distribution. She visited the infirmary, where injured refugees from the border villages were being treated. She held crying children and promised them their parents would return, promises she had no way of keeping. "You should eat something," Lyra said on the third evening, appearing in Arya's study with a tray of food. "You barely touched breakfast or lunch. I'm not hungry." Arya stared at the map spread across her desk, the one showing the eastern border. The villages marked in red where attacks had occurred. The projected path of the rogue army. They were getting closer to the heart of the territory, closer to the castle. "Starving yourself won't help, Cale," Lyra said firmly, setting down the tray. "You're Luna now. You need to stay strong for the pack. They're looking to you for stability while their alpha is gone." "I don't know how to give them stability," Arya admitted, slumping in her chair. "I'm barely keeping myself from falling apart. Every time I feel Cale's pain through the bond, even just the echo of it, I want to run to the eastern border myself." "Then maybe that's what you should do." Both women spun toward the door. Elder Moira stood there, her milky eyes somehow seeing straight through them. "What?" Arya said. "I can't leave the castle. I'm needed here." "To do what?" Elder Moira shuffled into the room, her walking stick tapping. "To pace and worry? To make promises to refugees that ring hollow because you have no power to fulfill them? Or to actually help?" "I'm not a warrior," Arya said. "I can't fight 200 rogues." "No, but you have something the warriors don't have." Elder Moira tapped her stick against the floor. "You have the guardian spirit, the moon goddess's own protection. And I know that power wasn't given to you just so you could survive Seraphina's challenge." Arya's hand moved unconsciously to her chest, where that sleeping presence resided. Since the Luna ceremony, it had been quiet, dormant, but she could feel it there, waiting. "What are you suggesting?" she asked carefully. "I'm suggesting that maybe the goddess gave you this power for exactly this moment, to protect your pack when they need it most." Elder Moira's expression grew grave. "I had another vision last night. I saw silver light pushing back darkness. I saw a wolfless Luna standing between her pack and destruction. I saw—" The old woman stopped, her face paling. "What?" Lyra pressed. "What else did you see?" "A choice," Elder Moira said quietly. "Between safety and sacrifice, between hiding and leading, between being the Luna everyone expected and being the Luna this pack actually needs." Before Arya could respond, a commotion erupted from the castle courtyard. Shouts, the thunder of hooves, alarm bells ringing. All three women rushed to the window. A rider was galloping through the gates, armor splattered with blood, horse foaming with exhaustion. Even from this distance, Arya recognized him. Beta Carson. Her stomach dropped. Why would Cale send his Beta back unless— "I need to go," she said, already moving toward the door. She ran through the castle, Lyra at her heels, and burst into the courtyard, just as Beta Carson was dismounting. He looked worse up close, a deep gash across his face, his arm hanging at an odd angle. "Beta Carson," Arya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Report." The Beta looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, there was no contempt in his eyes, just exhaustion and fear. "Luna," he said, and the title carried genuine respect now. "The rogues. They're not just rogues. They're being led by someone with dark magic. They have a witch with them, casting spells that turn our warriors' own strength against them. We're losing." The words hit like a physical blow. Losing? But Cale, the Alpha King, still fights. Commander Thorn holds the Eastern Ridge. But we're outnumbered and outmatched. The witch's magic creates barriers we can't break through, illusions that confuse our warriors, curses that weaken even our strongest fighters. Beta Carson swayed, and Arya grabbed his good arm to steady him. "How long before they reach the castle?" she asked. 2 days, maybe less if they push through the night. 2 days before, a rogue army with dark magic reached the castle, reached the refugees, reached the children sheltering in the infirmary, reached her pack. Arya felt something shift inside her chest. That sleeping presence stirred, responding to her fear and determination. "Finn," she called, "get Beta Carson to the infirmary. Treat his wounds." As the healer led Carson away, Arya turned to Lyra. Gather everyone with any combat training, guards, hunters, even farmers who know how to use a weapon. Tell them to meet me in the Great Hall in 1 hour. What are you planning? Lyra asked, though her eyes said she already knew. I'm planning to be Luna. Arya's voice was steady now, certain. Which means protecting my pack. Even if it kills me. 63 wolves gathered in the Great Hall. Not warriors, those were all at the eastern border. These were the ones left behind. Guards too old for frontline combat. Hunters past their prime. Farmers and merchants and scholars who'd learned basic fighting out of necessity but never expected to use it. And Omegas. Dozens of them, standing at the back, eyes wide with fear but present nonetheless. They all stared at Arya as she stood before them, still in her Luna coronet, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. I know you're afraid, she began. I'm afraid too. 2 days from now, a rogue army will reach this castle. Our warriors are fighting to stop them, but they're not enough, which means we have to be enough. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Doubt, fear, resignation. I'm not going to lie to you, Arya continued. Most of you aren't trained for this kind of fight. Neither am I. We're going to be facing enemies with dark magic and supernatural strength. The odds are against us. She paused, meeting as many eyes as she could. But I've learned something in the past 3 weeks. Strength isn't just about claws and fangs. It's about refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. It's about standing up even when you know you might fall. It's about protecting the ones who can't protect themselves. Her hand moved to the pendant at her throat, the one worn by the first Luna. Every single person in this room has been overlooked. Dismissed as too weak, too old, too Omega to matter. But I'm betting our lives, all our lives, on the possibility that you matter more than anyone ever told you. Silence. Then, from the back of the hall, an elderly guard stepped forward. I'm 73 years old, he said, his voice rough with age. I fought in the last great war 40 years ago. Lost my mate, lost my wolf 5 years back to old age. I figured I was done being useful. He straightened, his aged spine snapping to attention. But if my Luna says I still matter, then I'll stand with her, until my last breath. Another voice joined his, a young Omega woman. I've been told my whole life that Omegas exist to serve, not to fight. But you showed me different, Luna. You showed me we can be more. I'll fight. Then another. And another. One by one, wolves pledged themselves. Not because they thought they could win, but because their Luna had asked, and she'd proven she would never ask them to do something she wouldn't do herself. By the time the pledges ended, all 63 had committed. Thank you, Arya said, her voice thick with emotion. Now here's the plan. We can't match the rogues in strength, so we won't try. Instead, we're going to use the castle itself as a weapon. She moved to a large table where she'd spread architectural drawings of the castle. The castle has 3 defensive rings, the outer wall, the middle courtyard, and the inner keep. We're going to turn each one into a trap. She pointed to various locations on the map. Hunters, you'll position on the walls with arrows aimed for eyes and throats. The vulnerable spots even strong wolves can't fully protect. Farmers, you know how to dig trenches and set traps for predators. Do the same around the outer wall, but with silver-tipped stakes. Silver is expensive, someone pointed out. We don't have enough. Melt down every silver candlestick, plate, and decoration in this castle, Arya said firmly. Beauty means nothing if we're all dead. Commander Thorne taught me that survival requires sacrifice, so we sacrifice our pretty things for our lives. She continued laying out the plan, using the castle's narrow corridors to limit the rogues' numbers advantage. Creating choke points where a few defenders could hold off many attackers, setting up escape routes for the refugees if the defenses failed. What about the witch? Someone asked. Her magic will get through our defenses eventually. Arya's jaw clenched. Leave the witch to me. Luna, you can't face a dark witch alone. I have the guardian spirit, Arya interrupted. The moon goddess's protection. If anyone in this castle has a chance against dark magic, it's me. Besides, she smiled grimly, I'm tired of letting other people fight my battles. It's time I learned to fight my own. The next day passed in frantic preparation. Trenches were dug around the outer wall. Silver was melted down and formed into crude but effective weapons. Arrows were sharpened and poisoned with wolfsbane, not enough to kill, but enough to slow even supernatural healing. Arya worked alongside everyone else, her hands blistering as she helped dig trenches, her arms aching as she carried weapons to strategic positions. She refused special treatment, refused to stay safely in the castle while others risked themselves. If she was asking them to fight, she would fight beside them. As evening fell on the second day, a runner arrived from the eastern border. The rogues broke through Commander Thorne's line. He gasped, barely able to stand. "They're marching on the castle. They'll be here by midnight." Arya's heart clenched, but she kept her face calm. "Where's the Alpha King?" "Fighting a rearguard action with what warriors remain. He sent me to warn you, to tell you to evacuate, to get the refugees and yourself to safety in the northern mountains. Tell him we're not evacuating." Arya's voice was steel. "Tell him his Luna is holding the castle, and when he's done with the rearguard, he'd better hurry home, because I'm not doing his job and mine forever." The runner's eyes widened, then a grin cracked his exhausted face. "Yes, Luna. I'll tell him exactly that." As the runner departed to return to Cale, Arya turned to face her makeshift army. 63 wolves against 200 rogues and a dark witch. "Positions," she called. "The rogues will be here within hours. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. And remember," she raised her voice so everyone could hear, "you are not weak. You are not helpless. You are wolves of Silverstone, and this is our home. We will defend it until our last breath." A roar answered her, not the overwhelming sound of a full warrior pack, but the defiant cry of those who refused to give up without a fight. Arya climbed to the top of the outer wall, staring out at the dark forest. Through the mate bond, she felt Cale's presence distant, fighting, desperate to reach her. "I'm coming." His thought touched hers, faint but clear. "Hold on. Please hold on. I'll be here," she sent back. "Fighting for our pack. Come home safe." Then she felt it, a dark presence at the edge of her awareness. Cold, wrong, unnatural. The witch was coming, and with her, 200 rogues who wanted to tear down everything Arya had sworn to protect. She touched the guardian spirit sleeping in her chest. "Wake up," she whispered. "I need you. They all need you." The presence stirred, unfurling like a flower opening to the Sunday power flowed through her veins, not wolf power, but something older, purer. Silver light began to glow around her hands. Below, the defending wolves saw it and raised their weapons, howling their defiance into the night. "Let the rogues come," Arya thought. "Let them see what happens when they threaten a Luna who refuses to quit." The full moon rose over the mountains, bathing the castle in pale light. And in the forest, eyes began to glow, hundreds of them, moving closer. The battle for Silverstone Castle was about to begin. Chapter 10. The Silver Luna. The rogues emerged from the forest like a tide of darkness, 200 strong, moving with unnatural coordination. Their eyes glowed red, a sure sign of dark magic corruption. At their center walked a figure in black robes, face hidden beneath a hood. The witch. Arya stood atop the outer wall, the full moon at her back, and felt her guardian spirit surge with protective fury. Silver light pulsed around her like a heartbeat made visible. "Hold," she commanded her defenders. "Wait for my signal." The rogues approached the trenches, the carefully concealed pits lined with silver-tipped stakes. The first rank fell in with howls of agony, but the ones behind simply leaped over their dying packmates. They were expendable, tools of whoever controlled them. "Closer. Closer. Now," Arya screamed. Arrows rained down from the walls. Hunters who'd spent lifetimes tracking prey found their marks, eyes, throats, the soft spots between ribs. Rogues fell, but more kept coming. They hit the outer wall like a breaking wave. Claws scrabbled against stone. Some shifted mid-leap, using their wolf forms to scale the walls faster. The elderly guard who'd pledged himself first stood at Arya's left, a sword in his weathered hands. A young Omega fighter stood at her right, trembling but resolute. "For Silverstone!" the old guard roared, bringing his sword down on a rogue climbing over the wall's edge. The battle became chaos. Rogues poured over the wall, despite the defenders' best efforts. Hand-to-hand combat erupted across the battlements, farmers with pitchforks against corrupted wolves, hunters with knives against supernatural strength. They were holding, barely, but holding. Then the witch raised her hands. Dark energy exploded outward in a wave that knocked defenders off their feet. The torches lining the walls guttered and died, plunging the battlefield into shadow broken only by the moon's pale light. Pathetic, the witch's voice echoed, feminine, cold, ancient. Did you truly think mortals could stand against me? I, who have lived 3 centuries. I, who command death itself. She gestured, and the rogues who'd fallen, even those with arrows through their hearts, began to rise again. Not alive, not really, but animated by dark magic, twisted into something worse than death. The defenders' morale cracked. Several broke and ran. "Hold the line!" Arya screamed, but fear was contagious. More defenders fled toward the inner keep. The witch laughed. "Your people abandon you, little Luna. Where is your Alpha King now? Where is your strength?" Arya felt the guardian spirit roaring in her chest, demanding release. The silver light around her hands blazed brighter. "You want to see strength?" Arya stepped to the edge of the wall, staring down at the witch far below. "I'll show you what the moon goddess thinks of darkness." She jumped, 20 feet down to the courtyard below, a fall that should have shattered her legs. But the guardian spirit caught her, silver light cushioning her landing, spreading out beneath her feet like wings. She landed in a crouch, unhurt, glowing with power that made the moonlight look dim. The witch's hooded face turned toward her. "Interesting. The goddess has marked you. But divine favor won't save you from what's coming." She thrust her hands forward, and dark energy lanced toward Arya, black lightning that crackled with the stench of corruption and death. Arya's hands came up instinctively, and silver light burst forth to meet the darkness. The two forces collided in an explosion that shook the castle walls. For a moment, they were locked in place, dark magic against divine protection, witch against Luna. The air between them warped and twisted, reality straining under the pressure of opposing powers. "You're strong," the witch hissed. "Stronger than I expected, but you're untrained, raw, you don't even know what you're wielding." Another blast of dark energy. Arya blocked it, but the force drove her backward, her feet carving trenches in the stone. The witch was right. Arya had power, but no idea how to use it. She was blocking, defending, reacting, not attacking. And defense alone wouldn't win this fight. "How do I fight her?" Arya thought desperately, reaching out through the mate bond to Cale. His response came back immediately. Stronger now, he was closer. "You already know. You've been fighting your whole life. Not with claws or fangs, but with something she can't understand." "What?" "Hope. Refusal to surrender. Love for those you protect." She felt his absolute certainty through the bond. "She's lived for 3 centuries of darkness. Show her what light looks like." Arya understood. The witch was powerful, ancient, skilled in dark arts, but she'd spent 300 years surrounded by death and corruption and hatred. She'd forgotten, maybe never known, what it meant to fight for something worth saving. Arya stopped trying to block, and instead reached deep into her guardian spirit, not just for power, but for the emotion behind it. She thought of the orphanage, of 23 years being called broken. She thought of the auction block, of being sold for less than livestock. She thought of Cale's belief when everyone else saw nothing. She thought of Lyra's friendship, Commander Thorne's respect, Elder Moira's wisdom. She thought of the refugees in the castle, the children crying for their parents, the elderly guard who'd pledged his last breath. She thought of every single wolf who'd looked at her with hope and believed she could be more than what she was told she'd be. All of that. All that love and pain and stubborn determination she channeled into the guardian spirit. Silver light exploded from her in a wave that lit up the entire castle like a second Sunday. The witch shrieked, throwing up barriers of dark magic, but Arya's light burned through them like they were paper. "This is for every wolf who was told they didn't matter." Arya advanced, each step blazing with power. For every Omega dismissed as weak. For every broken soul who survived when the world wanted them gone. The light intensified, and the witch's animated dead began to fall. the dark magic holding them crumbling under the onslaught of pure divine energy. "Impossible," the witch screamed. "I am eternal. I am—" "You're alone," Arya said, and suddenly, she was right in front of the witch, close enough to see the ancient, twisted face beneath the hood. "You've spent 300 years with nothing but death and darkness. You've forgotten what it means to have something worth living for, worth fighting for." She placed her glowing hand on the witch's chest, right over her heart. "I remember," Arya said softly. "And that's why you've already lost." Silver light poured into the witch, not destroying, but purifying, burning away 3 centuries of corruption and dark magic, leaving only what had been there originally. A woman, just a woman, old and tired and suddenly, terribly mortal. The witch collapsed, her power gone, her eyes clearing for the first time in 300 years. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was gone, not dead, but freed, released from the darkness that had consumed her. Without the witch's magic, the rogues faltered. Their red eyes cleared, confusion replacing the corrupted rage. They looked around at the battlefield, at each other, at the castle they'd been attacking. Where are we?" one of them said, his voice dazed. They hadn't been evil, just enslaved, controlled by dark magic and forced to do the witch's bidding. "Stand down," Arya commanded, her voice carrying with Luna authority. "The witch is defeated. The magic controlling you is broken. You're free." One by one, the rogues dropped their weapons, collapsing from exhaustion and relief. The battle was over. Arya stood in the courtyard, swaying with exhaustion, as her defenders emerged from the castle. They stared at her, at the silver light, still glowing faintly around her, at the defeated rogues, at the impossible victory they'd just witnessed. Then the elderly guard dropped to one knee. "Luna." The young Omega followed. "Luna." One by one, every defender, every wolf who'd fought beside her knelt. "All hail Luna Arya," someone shouted. "The Silver Luna, protector of Silverstone." The cry was taken up, echoing across the battlefield, carrying into the night. And from the forest, a new sound emerged. Howling. But not rogues this time. Warriors. Cowles warriors, victorious from the eastern border, racing home to help defend the castle. Leading them, a massive black wolf with golden eyes. Cale. He shifted mid-run, his human form appearing as he crashed through the castle gates. His armor was shredded, blood streaked his skin. Exhaustion lined his face, but when he saw Arya standing there, glowing, alive, victorious joy blazed in his expression. "Arya," he breathed, closing the distance between them in 3 strides and pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, her strength finally giving out. "I held the castle," she said against his chest. "Like I promised." "You did more than hold it." Cale's voice was thick with emotion. "You saved it, saved all of them, you magnificent, impossible woman." Through their bond, she felt everything he couldn't say aloud, his fear, when he'd felt the battle through their connection, his desperate race to reach her, his overwhelming pride and love and relief that she was alive. "I couldn't have done it without them," Arya said, looking at her defenders. "They believed in me, fought beside me, refused to quit even when it seemed hopeless." She pulled back enough to meet Cale's eyes. "That's what being Luna means, isn't it? Not being the strongest or the most powerful, but being worth following, worth believing in." "You've always been worth believing in," Cale said, pressing his forehead to hers. "I just gave you the chance to show everyone else." Commander Thorne appeared, limping but alive, her scarred face split with a proud smile. "Well fought, Luna. You held the castle with 63 defenders against 200 rogues and a dark witch. That's a feat that will be sung about for generations." "The Silver Luna," Beta Carson added, approaching with his arm in a fresh sling. "Who proved that strength comes in many forms. You've changed what it means to be Luna, Your Majesty. Changed it forever." Arya looked around at the wolves gathering warriors returning from the border, defenders who'd fought beside her, even some of the freed rogues who were being tended by healers. All of them looked at her with respect, not grudging respect, not the forced respect given to someone because of their title, real respect, earned through action. Lyra pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around Arya, nearly knocking her over. "You terrifying, brilliant, reckless woman. When you jumped off that wall, I thought my heart would stop." "I had a plan," Arya protested. "Your plan was, don't die. That's not a plan." Despite everything, the exhaustion, the lingering fear, the aches from battle, Arya laughed. Real, genuine laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. She was alive. Her pack was safe. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely at peace with who she was. Not broken, not cursed, not worthless. Just Arya, the wolfless Omega who'd become a queen. 3 months later, the Grand Hall was filled with wolves from all 5 packs of the Northern Territories. They'd gathered for the first official Luna Court, a tradition where subjects could bring grievances or requests directly to their Luna. Arya sat on a throne beside Cowles, wearing a crown of silver and moonstone that caught the light. She no longer felt like an imposter in the role. She'd earned this seat through blood and determination, and refusing to quit. "Next petition," Beta Carson announced. A young Omega woman stepped forward, barely 18, her eyes downcast. "Luna, I want a challenge for Beta rank in my pack. But the elders say Omegas can't hold positions of authority. They say it's against tradition." Arya leaned forward. "What's your name?" "Mira, Your Majesty." "Mira, look at me." The girl raised her eyes, afraid but hopeful. 3 months ago, I stood on an auction block being sold as less than livestock," Arya said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Today, I'm Queen of the Northern Territories. Do you know how that happened? Because you refused to accept what they told you that you were?" "Exactly," Arya smiled. "The elders in your pack are wrong. Traditions that hold good wolves down aren't sacred, they're chains. And chains are made to be broken." She looked at the delegation from Mira's pack elders, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. "I'm making a new law, effective immediately across all territories under my rule. Any wolf, regardless of designation as Alpha, Beta, or Omega, may challenge for rank. Ability, not birth, determines worth. Anyone who denies a wolf the right to prove themselves answers to me." The hall erupted in whispers, some shocked, some approving. "But Luna," one of the elders protested. "This will upset centuries of pack structure." "Good," Arya interrupted. "It should be upset. How many talented wolves have we wasted because they were born Omega? How many future leaders have we overlooked because tradition said they couldn't lead?" She stood, her voice ringing with authority. "That ends now. In Silverstone, and in every pack that claims allegiance to this crown, worth is earned through action, not predetermined by birth." She turned back to Mira. "Go back to your pack. Train, prepare, and when you're ready, challenge for that Beta position. And if anyone tries to stop you, send word to your Luna. I'll come personally to ensure you get your fair chance." Tears streamed down Mira's face. "Thank you, Luna. Thank you." As the girl left, Cale reached over and squeezed Arya's hand. Through their bond, she felt his pride and love. "You're changing the world," he sent to her mind. "We're changing it," she corrected. Together, the petitions continued through the afternoon. Disputes over territory, requests for aid for struggling villages, a farmer asking permission to marry a wolf from another pack. Arya heard them all, making decisions with a confidence that had grown from experience. She wasn't perfect, still made mistakes, still second-guessed herself sometimes, but she was learning, growing, becoming the Luna this pack needed. As evening fell and the court adjourned, Arya and Cale walked through the castle gardens. The moonblooms were in full flower, their silver petals glowing in the twilight. "Do you ever regret it?" Cale asked suddenly. "Agreeing to this life? Being Luna means you can never be anonymous again. Never just be Arya." She thought about it, really thought about it. About the girl from the orphanage who'd never imagined she could be anything but broken. "I regret nothing," she said finally. "Because yes, I lost anonymity, lost the option of being invisible. But I gained something infinitely more valuable." "What's that?" "Purpose." Arya turned to face him, the moonlight painting them both in silver. "For 23 years, I survived, but I wasn't living, wasn't making any impact on the world. Now every decision I make, Every law I change, every wolf I help, it matters. I matter. She reached up to cup his face. You gave me that. Not the crown or the title, but the belief that I was worth something, that I could be more than broken. Cale pulled her close, kissing her with the fierce tenderness that never failed to make her heart race. You were always more than broken. I just made sure you couldn't hide from it anymore. They stood in the garden as the full moon rose, two broken pieces that had somehow fit together to make something whole. A wolfless Luna and the Alpha King who'd seen her worth. And across the territories, in villages and pack houses and hidden corners, wolves looked up at that moon and thought of the Silver Luna. The one who'd proven that strength had nothing to do with claws and fangs. The one who'd shown them that even the most broken among them could become queens. Stories were told. Songs were sung. Children fell asleep to tales of the Omega who refused to quit. And in the years that followed, those children grew up believing something revolutionary. That they could be more than what the world told them they had to be. That worth was earned, not given. That even the smallest, weakest, most overlooked wolf could change everything. All because one Omega refused to bow her head on an auction block. All because an Alpha King recognized what everyone else had missed. All because love, real, chosen, fought for love, could break every chain society tried to wrap around them. The moon shone down on Silverstone Castle, and in its silver light, Arya smiled. She was home. She was whole. She was exactly where she belonged. And the broken girl from the orphanage? She was finally, impossibly, beautifully free. Total story word count: approximately 8,985 words across 10 chapters. Epilogue. 1 year later. The nursery was painted in soft blues and silvers, moonlight streaming through tall windows. Arya stood over the cradle, watching the baby sleep, a girl with silver hair like her mother's and golden eyes like her father's. She's perfect, Cale whispered, wrapping his arms around Arya from behind. She's going to change everything, Arya said softly. A child born of a mated pair where one has no wolf. The healers said it was impossible. We've made a habit of doing the impossible. Cale pressed a kiss to her temple. What should we name her? Arya thought of the moon goddess who'd protected her. Of Elder Moira who'd believed in her. Of every wolf who'd looked at her with hope. Hope, she said. We'll name her Hope, because that's what she represents. Proof that love creates its own kind of magic. The baby stirred, opening eyes that already showed intelligence beyond her weeks. And in those eyes, Arya saw the future. A future where being different wasn't a curse. Where worth wasn't determined by wolf or human. Where every child, Omega or Alpha, wolfless or blessed, knew they could be anything they chose to be. The broken Omega had become a queen, and her daughter would grow up in a world where that was possible. Where anything was possible. The Silver Luna story was complete, but the legend had only just begun.